Chapter 198. After a great battle, less than 50 of the 300 myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who came as reinforcements managed to escape. Many of them were guardian envoys from the major sects in the core region. Even Yan Xing, who was ranked second on the spirit stream list, was severely injured and had to escape. Yan Xing was also unlucky. Ever since he fought with Li Baxian in the spirit stream battlefield, he knew that he couldn't take revenge with his own strength. The spirit stream battle was a great opportunity, so he had been paying attention to Li Baxian's location and movements. After the continent was formed, he immediately joined forces with the other myriad Devil Ridge cultivators to chase after Li Baxian's whereabouts. He was just in time for this battle and was involved in it. Then, he was taught a lesson by a group of low-level cultivators who he usually wouldn't even look at. This was a victory for the Grand Heaven Alliance, and it was also a celebration for the low-level cultivators. This battle perfectly demonstrated what it meant to have the advantage in numbers. After the battle, the Grand Heaven Alliance only needed to rest for a while before they split into two groups under the leadership of the powerhouses from the core circle. They searched for and eliminated the enemy cultivators from the outer circle and the inner circle. As the news spread, more and more powerhouses from the core circle joined in. Originally, they were defeated by the people from the myriad Devil Ridge, but they didn't expect the situation to turn around. The low-level cultivators on their side were so capable. Before the merging of the continents was completed, the myriad Devil Ridge had the upper hand in terms of both high-level and low-level cultivators. Even if they had a team with the two from the Jade Blood sect as the core, they could not make up for the difference in numbers. Under such circumstances, as long as the myriad Devil Ridge was determined, the Grand Heaven Alliance's chances of survival would only become smaller and smaller. It was not possible to annihilate the entire Grand Heaven Alliance before the battle to guard Lingxi. However, it was still possible to annihilate 80 to 90% of them. This would achieve the initial goal set by the myriad Devil Ridge. In the next few decades, the Grand Heaven Alliance would lose many people who could support them and would no longer be able to compete with the myriad Devil Ridge. However, the myriad Demons Ridge had been careless after all. With the situation in their favor, everyone had relaxed a little. In other words, no one had expected that there would be such an invincible team of low-level cultivators. In just a few days, this team swept through the outer circle of the continent and killed the people from the myriad Devil Ridge. In the final battle, they even killed a large number of high-level cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge. As a result, the advantageous situation was changed. The Grand Heaven Alliance definitely had the advantage in terms of low-level cultivators, and it was far more than the myriad Devil Ridge. In terms of high-level cultivators, they were about the same. After all, the Grand Heaven Alliance had suffered great losses in the past 20 days. However, in the entire Chess Sea continent, the situation of the Haotian Alliance had been completely revived. Now, it was the Haotian Alliance's turn to capture the cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge. Little junior brother, you and junior sister Hua Ci have won a lot of face for the sect this time. This old man is probably smiling in his dreams. Li Baxian's voice rang out. After the previous battle, he and Feng Yuechan did not participate in the follow-up. Instead, they found Lu Yi, who was protecting Hua Ci. Then himself. It's mainly because of Hua Ci. Lu Yi replied vaguely as he chewed on his jerky. This was the truth. The most he could do was to provide spirit-gathering runes for the cultivators on his side to recover. Not only could Hua Ci heal others, she could also help them kill their enemies. Li Baxian turned to look at Hua Ci, who was whispering to Feng Yuechan. He nodded. Junior sister Hua Ci contributed the most. You're not insignificant either. He winked at Lu Yi. Where did you find this junior sister? Find a few more later. Lu Ye's cheeks puffed up as he ate in big mouthfuls. Li Baxian patted his shoulder. With you guys in the sect, I'm much more relieved. Let's go. I'll take you on a treasure hunt. Lu Yi was instantly interested. He hurriedly gulped down the food in his mouth. His throat slid down slowly. What treasure hunt? I don't know. It depends on luck. Li Baxian smiled gently. He grabbed his wine gourd and threw it to Lu Yi. Lu Yi looked around, opened the gourd, and took a sip. Suddenly, his stomach felt like it was on fire. At the same time, a feeling of dizziness rushed to the top of his head. He immediately staggered. In a panic, he hurriedly changed his secret art and activated gluttonous meal. A buzzing sound came from his stomach as he dispelled the drunkenness. After a while, he stood firm and shook his head. So strong. He threw the wine gourd to Li Baxian. He knew that he couldn't drink too much of this wine. Drinking one mouthful was his limit. Li Baxian laughed. Although it was a treasure hunt, they couldn't find anything good. Perhaps there were many precious treasures before, but as the cultivators of both camps continued to wander and search, all the good things were taken away. Along the way, Hua Xiai found a lot of herbs with her medical skills. She was accompanied by a mechanical wolf given to her by Lu Yushan's junior sister. The mechanical wolf was full of storage bags. After an hour, Li Baxian, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped and glanced in a certain direction. He smiled and asked, "Little junior brother, can you kill an 8th order realm cultivator?" Lu Yi didn't know why he asked this question. He pondered for a moment and said, "I should be able to." "Can you really kill one?" Li Baxian was a little surprised. On the Golden Light, Lu Yi was a 5th order cultivator. He once said that if he went all out, he could kill a 7th order cultivator. Facts proved that he did have such ability. Although he didn't kill a 7th order cultivator at that time, he fought 43 battles in a row. In the last battle, he even killed the Sacred Flame sect saintess who destroyed her spirit aperture. Now that Lu Yi was a 6th order cultivator, Li Baxian just remembered Lu Ye's words and asked casually. He didn't expect Lu Yi to give such an answer. "Do you know that after a cultivator reaches the 7th order, every time they break through to the next realm, their strength will increase more than before?" Li Baxian looked at him seriously and nodded. "In that case, let this brother open his eyes." While Lu Yi was confused, he saw Li Baxian look in a certain direction. "Do you want to come out on your own, or do you want me to force you out?" As soon as this was said, Feng Yuechan's figure suddenly fluttered and landed in a certain direction. After standing still, he and Li Baxian stared at the same spot. Lu Yi followed their gazes but couldn't see anything. There was only a big rock there. But in next to no time, something that shocked him occurred. Accompanied by a wave of distortion in the air beside the boulder, a thin figure appeared. It was a young man with a gloomy expression. He had a hooked nose, and his face was gloomy to the point it was about to drip water. Lu Yi didn't know what method he used to hide here perfectly. If Li Baxian hadn't seen through him at a glance, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to find him even if he stepped on the big rock. "Oh!" Li Baxian laughed, "It's you." It looked like they knew each other. The Flowing Clouds sect has no enmity with the Pill Heart sect and the Jade Blood sect. Our Flowing Clouds sect didn't participate in the Battle of the Golden Light Summit. "Li Baxian, tell me what you want." "I just want to live," said the gloomy young man. Li Baxian raised his hand and scratched his chin, chuckling. "Isn't the Flowing Clouds sect not participating because war was declared? Besides, you're from the Myriad Devil Ridge and I'm from the Grand Heaven Alliance. Our camps are natural opposites. Didn't your grandfather tell you that the difference in camps is the reason for killing?" The young man's tone became serious. "Do you have to do this?" As he spoke, he glanced at Lu Yi and Hua Xiai. Obviously, he wanted to make an issue out of them. He wasn't weak, but Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan weren't easy to deal with. This pair of B***cheese were always inseparable. Offending one was equivalent to offending two. No one could afford to offend them. Now, a large number of Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators were constantly searching for traces of the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it was. He originally wanted to escape to the periphery because the safest place in the entire continent was the periphery. Who would have thought that he would meet Li Baxi and Feng Yuechan here? His luck was so bad that he could choke on water. I'll show you a way out. Do you want to take it? Li Baxi looked at him with a smile. What? Li Baxi patted Lu Ye's shoulder. Fight with my junior brother. If you win, I'll let you go. Lu Yi and the young man were stunned. Lu Yi finally understood what his fourth senior brother meant when he asked him that question. The young man didn't look happy. Instead, he said angrily, Li Baxi, are you crazy? If I hurt or kill this little guy, can I still leave? He had heard about the incident at the Golden Light Summit, and had also deeply experienced the Jade Blood sect's style of protecting their own. That true lake stage expert killed his way into the spirit stream battlefield as he pleased, and even endured the damage from the soul-extinguishing godly lightning to kill a group of low-level cultivators. In the entire 9 continents, which sect's true lake stage expert would dare to do such a despicable thing? Only the Jade Blood sect. Therefore, when Li Baxi asked him to fight with Lu Yi, not only was he not happy, he even felt that he was being made fun of. As the old saying goes, when you're under someone else's roof, you have to lower your head. Looks like you don't understand your situation. Li Baxi lowered his eyes slightly. On the other side, spiritual power surged in Feng Yuechan's hand. A ball of compressed flame-like thing was tossed around in her small hand. The young man's eyes twitched. He knew that if he didn't agree, he would be besieged by the number 1 and number 10 on the spirit stream list. This was a mixed pair of sword cultivators and spell cultivators. At that time, there would be no way for him to survive. If I beat this little guy, will you really let me go? I guarantee it with my junior brother's reputation. Li Baxi patted Lu Ye's shoulder. Lu Yi frowned. Why did he have to guarantee it with his reputation? From another point of view, did his fourth senior brother not have much credibility? This was a big problem. Don't play such a childish game. Besides you, there's still Feng Yuechan. As for her, I guarantee it with my junior sister's reputation. Li Baxi pointed at Hua Xi, who was standing to the side. Hua Xi smiled very innocently. The young man said, please make a heavenly oath. Cut the crap. Li Baxi angrily shouted, if I tell you to fight, then fight. So much nonsense, be careful or I'll send you flying with my sword. The young man suddenly felt extremely sullen. Who are you putting on this humiliated look for? If you fight with my junior brother, if you're lucky, you can drag someone down with you. Isn't this what you're thinking? Li Baxi coldly snorted, exposing the young man's thoughts. Chapter 199. When he was discovered by Li Baxi, this young man knew that he had no way out, so he had put on all kinds of gestures in order to numb Li Baxi. Now that he had been exposed, he didn't say anything else and simply waved the 2 curved blades in his hands and assumed a fighting stance, then come. Lu Yi raised his hand and placed it on the hilt, gently gripping it. Li Baxian's voice sounded in his ear, little junior brother, be careful, this guy is a ghost cultivator. Don't underestimate him just because he's an 8th order cultivator. In fact, his true cultivation is at the 7th order heaven grade and he has opened more than 240 spirit apertures. Of course, this position is suppressed by heaven's fate, so the strength he can display is only at the level of an ordinary 8th order, but his killing experience won't be suppressed, and his strength and speed are not comparable to an ordinary 8th order cultivator. Even if you can defeat an ordinary 8th order cultivator, you may not necessarily be his opponent. I know. Lu Yi responded, and as soon as he finished speaking, he rushed towards the gloomy young man. He didn't care why Li Baxi had made him face such an opponent alone, but now that the Spirit Stream garrison battle was coming to an end, he had to cherish this rare opportunity to kill his enemy. Almost at the same time Lu Yi moved, a stream of light shot out and arrived in front of him in an instant. Unsheathing his long saber, Lu Yi slashed out, causing sparks to fly. Lu Yi felt a strong force hit him head-on, causing the web between his thumb and forefinger to split open and the mountain blade in his hand to be knocked back. Following this force, Lu Yi raised his long saber and slashed away the flowing light that was about to slash at his chest. This stream of light was actually one of the curved blades in his opponent's hand. The blow just now was just the power of his opponent's imperial artifact. As the curved blade spun through the air, a wound appeared on Lu Ye's chest, from which blood flowed out. It was obvious he had been injured by his opponent's curved blade. Before he could stabilize himself, a figure flashed in front of him and the gloomy young man rushed forward at an incredible speed. Ghost cultivators were known for their speed, not to mention that this was a 7th-order heaven-grade ghost cultivator. Although Heaven's secret suppression had limited him to the level of an 8th-order cultivator, his speed was still not something an ordinary 8th-order cultivator could match. The other curved blade in his opponent's hand slashed towards Lu Ye's face. Lu Yi raised his blade to block, but a loud clang rang out as his figure staggered backwards. At the same time, a strong wind blew from behind his head as the curved blade he had sent flying flew back towards him. The Tao of equipment manipulation was simply unfathomable to Lu Yan. Hua Xiai looked nervous. Li Baxian had already grasped a sword light in his hand. Although he had asked Lu Yi to fight this ghost cultivator, he would not just sit by and watch. If Lu Ye's life was really in danger, he would step in. Just as the scimitar was about to hit the back of Lu Ye's head, a spirit pattern suddenly appeared. At the same time, Lu Ye's head sank down, narrowly avoiding the blow. A few broken hairs fluttered in the wind. At the same time, the long blade in his hand stabbed forward, a fiery red spirit chi wrapped around it as the sharpness spirit pattern strengthened it. The ghost cultivator sidestepped the blow and flipped the scimitar in his hand like a living creature, cutting the flesh on Lu Ye's arm at an incredible angle, causing blood to flow out. The battle had only been going on for 3 breaths, but Lu Yi already had 2 wounds on his body. Although the injuries were not serious, it could be seen that the gap between their strengths was not small. If they continued to fight like this, Lu Ye's situation would only get worse. Feng Yuechan glanced at Li Baxian leisurely, asking for his opinion. Li Baxian slowly shook his head. Now was not the time to intervene. The reason why he wanted Lu Yi to deal with this ghost cultivator was mainly because the opportunity was rare. Although he had taught Lu Yi for 20 days in the Blue Blood sect, it was still the teaching of a senior brother. Even if he was ruthless and injured Lu Yi repeatedly, it was difficult for Lu Yi to truly experience the feeling of life and death because both of them knew that Li Baxian could not really kill him. But the current situation was different. Lu Yi was fighting a myriad demon ridge cultivator. If he was not careful enough, he could really die. As a weapon cultivator, if he could not get used to the feeling of walking on the edge of life and death, it would be difficult for him to break through. However, the current situation made Li Baxian a little hesitant, wondering if he had been too hasty. The opponent he had chosen for Lu Yi was too strong. Little junior brother might have a chance against an ordinary 8th-order cultivator with his current strength, but facing this opponent was really difficult. Fortunately, although Lu Yi was completely at a disadvantage, his fighting spirit did not diminish at all. In the blink of an eye, the two exchanged several moves. The ghost cultivator was stronger than Lu Yi in both speed and strength. Coupled with the fact that he could use Imperial Artifact, Lu Yi was in a difficult situation. He slowly familiarized himself with his opponent's rhythm. Although he could not reverse the situation, he was able to block the power of his opponent's Imperial Artifact several times with his Imperial Spirit Rune and take advantage of the situation to counterattack. During the exchange of blows, the ghost cultivator suddenly retracted the curved blade that he had sent flying. He realized that this Blue Blood sect cultivator, who was famous in Golden Light Peak, was indeed powerful. His true strength was definitely not just a 6th-order cultivator. He thought that he could easily deal with his opponent and had already made up his mind to capture Lu Yi and hold him hostage in exchange for his own life. He did not dare to delay any longer. Feng Yuechan and Li Baxian were eyeing him covetously, giving him a lot of pressure. In this kind of close combat, the power of his imperial artifact was not great, so it was better to withdraw it. With the two sabers in hand, his attack speed suddenly increased a lot. Lu Yi was immediately unlucky, with wounds appearing on his body. But as the number of wounds increased, the speed and strength of his attacks also increased, and the spirit energy attached to the sabers became much denser. After a dozen breaths, Lu Yi slowly stabilized his footing and was actually able to exchange blows with his opponent. The ghost cultivator was surprised. He could not understand how Lu Yi could improve so much in such a short period of time. After another dozen breaths, he was shocked to find that he was beginning to fall into a disadvantage in terms of speed and strength. Not only was Lu Yi injured when his spirit artifacts collided, but he was also gradually getting injured. At this moment, the mountain plate saber's blade was red, as if it had drunk enough blood. If one looked carefully, they would find that there was a faint blood qi rising from Lu Ye's body. The ghost cultivator finally realized that something was wrong and exclaimed, "A blood artifact?" A blood artifact was a special kind of spirit artifact that was branded with a blood sacrifice spirit mark. When the owner was injured or offered up his own blood, the blood artifact would become stronger. The more blood the blood artifact devoured, the more powerful it would become. Therefore, when he saw the changes in Lu Ye's mountain plate saber, the ghost cultivator thought that it was a blood artifact. A blood artifact was powerful, but once it was activated, it would be extremely dangerous to the user because it would continuously devour blood. If one was not careful, they would die from blood loss. Therefore, in the cultivation world, blood artifacts were not very popular, and ordinary cultivators would not use them. Even the ghost cultivators could see that something was wrong with the saber. Naturally, Li Baxian could see it as well. His expression became serious. He only wanted Lu Yi to gain some experience in fighting against powerful enemies. Who would have thought that his junior brother would even use his blood treasure? This was not good. If his foundation and vitality were damaged because of this, his second senior sister would definitely smash his head into smithereens. It's not a blood artifact. Fourth senior brother, don't worry. Hua Xi's voice sounded. What is that? Li Baxian asked. Hua Xi explained, Lu Yi has mastered a blood-stained spirit mark. What he's activating now is probably the power of that spirit mark. Previously, Lu Yi had revealed to Madame Yun that he had mastered 4 spirit marks. Hua Xi was there at that time, so she naturally remembered. Bloodstain. Li Baxian frowned. He didn't know much about spirit marks and couldn't calm down to study them. Therefore, he didn't know what the blood-stained spirit mark was. However, it was fine as long as the saber wasn't a blood artifact. Clanging sounds could be heard as the battle continued. Lu Ye's body was covered in wounds, but the strange thing was that all the blood that flowed out of his wounds turned into a bloody mist. Not a single drop fell. If Lu Ye's clothes were to be ripped apart, one would be able to see a complex spirit pattern slowly rotating on his chest. The spirit pattern was completely formed by blood, and a bloody mist lingered around his body, causing his eyes to turn scarlet. The blood-stained spirit mark wasn't applied to the mountain plate saber, but to his own body. As his blood continued to turn into a mist, Lu Ye's attacks became faster and faster, and his strength grew fiercer and fiercer. He had long since surpassed his body's limits. The situation had completely reversed. The ghost cultivator, who had originally held the upper hand, could only parry Lu Ye's attacks. He couldn't retaliate at all. After a few moments of intense battle, the ghost cultivator's chest was struck by Lu Ye's saber. A miserable cry rang out as the ghost cultivator staggered a few steps back. Blood flowed from the huge wound on his chest. When he looked up, he saw a pair of flickering red eyes in front of him. Wrapped in a bloody mist, Lu Ye's saber slashed down like a storm. He roared as he raised his spirit artifact. The sound of the blade cutting through flesh rang out. Lu Yi raised his saber and flashed behind the ghost cultivator. He landed lightly on the ground, shook off the blood on the mountain plate saber, and sheathed it. The ghost cultivator's body stiffened. He maintained his defensive posture, then stiffly fell to the ground. Blood flowed from his body. The bloody mist wrapped around Lu Yi dispersed, revealing his figure. His body went soft, and before he could fall to the ground, Li Baxi had already supported him. "I'm exhausted," Lu Yi explained. His face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. He had lost too much blood. Li Baxian's expression was complicated. After a long time, he said, "Little junior brother, you fought too hard." He never expected such a result. Even when Lu Yi said that he could kill an 8th order cultivator, he thought it was just the arrogance of a young man. He was prepared to intervene at any time. But in the end, his little junior brother really killed the ghost cultivator. He single-handedly killed the ghost cultivator. That was too fierce. That was a 7th order heaven-grade cultivator. Even if he was suppressed, he wouldn't be worse than an ordinary 9th order cultivator. Li Baxian suddenly realized that he seemed to have underestimated his little junior brother. Chapter 200. In the wilderness, Lu Yi was lying flat on a large rock. Hua Xi was kneeling beside him, gently rubbing his arm. As she did so, streams of pure wood spirit energy poured into Lu Ye's body, penetrating deep into his muscles and repairing the hidden injuries that were invisible to the naked eye. Li Baxian sat awkwardly to the side, while Feng Yuechan stood guard not far away. A formation had been set up around them. There was no need to look for any treasures now. After the battle just now, Lu Yi was seriously injured, but he was completely exhausted. He felt his flesh and blood aching all over. At this moment, he didn't even have the strength to move a finger. When Lu Yi obtained the bloodstained spirit pattern, he knew that he had one more method to deal with a strong enemy, but he hadn't had the chance to try it until now. This spirit pattern was indeed amazing. It could increase one's strength by devouring Lu Ye's blood. The more blood it devoured, the greater the improvement. Just by looking at the battle just now, Lu Yi was not the ghost cultivator's opponent at all. Whether it was strength or speed, the ghost cultivator was much stronger than him, and the ghost cultivator could even use a flying tool. However, as the blood-stained spirit pattern continued to work, the gap between them was slowly closed, and Lu Yi even surpassed the ghost cultivator. Moreover, Lu Yi felt that the blood-stained spirit pattern had not reached its limit. If he could devour more blood, his improvement would be even greater. In the future, if he encountered an opponent stronger than him, as long as he wasn't instantly killed, he would have a chance to turn defeat into victory. The blood-stained spirit pattern was strong enough, but the price was also obvious. Because he had displayed strength beyond his limit, Lu Ye's muscles were damaged and he had lost too much blood. Moreover, maintaining the blood-stained spirit pattern consumed a lot of spirit energy. This thing was different from sharpness and defense. It had to be maintained continuously. If Lu Yi hadn't opened more than 80 apertures and had a lot of spirit energy stored in his body, he wouldn't have been qualified to use this spirit pattern in battle. This was a one-time deal. It could also be regarded as a trump card. Once it was used, it would either kill the enemy or himself. This was the result of Lu Ye's recent practice of using the scale armor to temper his body. Every time he cultivated in the cultivation room, he would place the scale armor in the groove of the spirit gathering formation. Using the spirit gathering formation, he would stimulate the blood energy in the scale armor to devour and refine it to temper his body. Otherwise, the damage this time would have been even more serious. With Hua Xi's help, Lu Yi slowly recovered some of her strength. She took out some jerky and ate it while enjoying Hua Xi's treatment. After that battle, he felt so hungry that he could eat a cow. With a large amount of food in his stomach, Lu Ye's face finally regained some color. Half a day later, he slowly got up. Although he still felt weak, there were no major problems. The after effects of using bloodstain were too great. Lu Yi secretly decided that he would not use this thing unless it was absolutely necessary. Li Baxian looked at him from the side and asked with concern, "How do you feel?" "It's great." Thank you, senior brother. If it wasn't for Li Baxi looking after him, he really wouldn't have had the chance to fight with such an expert. After tasting the sweetness of victory, he couldn't help but want Li Baxi to take him to find those lone myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. This kind of life and death battle was very beneficial to one's growth. However, even with Hua Xi's treatment, he had not fully recovered, so he could only suppress the thought in his heart. If there's nothing serious, I'll take you to see something good. Sure. The four of them continued on their way. After traveling for dozens of miles, Li Baxian's suppressed strength slowly recovered. Although he was not at his peak, flying on a magic tool was no problem for him. He threw out his wine gourd. As the spiritual power around him surged, the gourd immediately enlarged and he jumped on it. Feng Yuechan followed closely behind, and Hua Xi jumped up with her mechanical wolf. She even pulled the limp Lu Yi along. Up! Li Baxian shouted. The gourd rose into the air and quickly flew forward. Flying on a magic tool greatly reduced the time it took to travel. The deeper they went, the less the suppression Li Baxian felt. In less than half an hour, he brought Lu Yi and the others to a place where a crowd gathered. Looking at the scale, all the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators should have gathered here. There were traces of a great battle all around. Obviously, there had been a fierce battle here. As soon as the iconic wine gourd spirit tool appeared, it attracted many people's attention. Someone pointed at the wine gourd and laughed. Fellow Daoist Li and fellow Daoist Feng are finally here. The myriad Devil Ridge people will give up now. When the gourd landed, many people who were meditating and resting got up to greet them. Li Baxian jumped off the gourd and looked up at a big tree in front of him. What's the situation? A burly body cultivator replied, the myriad Devil Ridge people didn't give up and organized a few attacks. However, after being taught a few lessons, they calmed down. Now that you're here, the myriad Devil Ridge people won't dare to show up so easily. Li Baxian nodded slightly and greeted some people. On the other side, there were also many low-level cultivators chatting with Lu Yi and Hua Xi. Everyone had been fighting side by side before and many of them had been treated by Hua Xi, so they naturally had a good impression of this deputy protector of the Blue Blood sect, not to mention that Hua Xi was a gentle beauty. In the last large-scale battle with the myriad Devil Ridge, Lu Yi and Hua Xi took the risk to fly above the enemy camp and activated the arrangements they had left behind to secure victory. It could be said that Grand Heaven Alliance's current situation was due to the two people from the Jade Blood sect. These two are junior brother Yi and junior sister Hua Xi from the Jade Blood sect, right? The body cultivator who was talking to Li Baxian suddenly looked at Lu Yi. Li Baxian smiled and patted Lu Ye's shoulder. Greetings, senior brother Meng Si. I'm the guardian of the Vitality sect, 9th level heaven grade, 18th on the spirit stream list. This ranking was not low. Lu Yi and Hua Xi bowed together. As for the Vitality sect, Lu Yi was already familiar with it. It was a first-grade sect of the Grand Heaven Alliance in the War Province. Their vice-sect master Pang Zhen was the vice-alliance master of the Grand Heaven Alliance and was in charge of all matters of the War Province's cultivation world. Meng Si nodded slightly. The descendants of famous sects are indeed extraordinary. The two of you have contributed greatly to the spirit stream battle. On behalf of the War Province's cultivation world, I thank the two of you. Saying so, he bowed solemnly to Lu Yi and Hua Xi. Behind him, a group of 8th and 9th order heaven grade cultivators from the War Province also bowed together. Lu Yi and Hua Xi were rather flustered. Before the two of them could say anything, another cultivator with an ethereal aura said, the cultivation world of the Ding province thanks the two junior brothers and junior sisters of the Jade Blood sect. Another person said, the cultivation world of the Cloud province thanks the two junior brothers and junior sisters of the Jade Blood sect. The cultivation world of the Thunder province thanks the two junior brothers and junior sisters of the Jade Blood sect. The Mist province, wave after wave of cultivators bowed, rising and falling like the wind blowing through straw. Lu Yi and Hua Xiai looked at each other and returned the bow together. They were solemn. Li Baxian stood to one side and watched. He knew that his junior brother and sister had basically become renowned throughout the world today. This was different from the incident on the Golden Light Summit. Back then, the cultivation world had worked together to protect the safety of the last spirit stream disciple of the Jade Blood sect in order to commemorate the merits of the Jade Blood sect in the past. That was a legacy left behind by the Jade Blood sect in the past. However, in this battle of Spirit Creek, Lu Yi and Hua Xiai had relied on their own abilities to bring glory to their sect. Li Baxian's thoughts churned as he recalled a blurry and imposing figure. Eldest senior brother, oh eldest senior brother, if you're still in heaven, you should be able to rest easy. The banner of the Jade Blood sect has not fallen. Several decades later, someone had taken over this banner and raised it up, waving it in the sky above Grand Heaven Alliance. Junior brothers and junior sisters, if you want to go to the core region to train in the future, just give us a call and come to the Vitality Sect's encampment, Meng Si said. You can also come to the encampment of my Blue Cloud Palace. Everyone else spoke up as well, expressing that they could go to their encampments to train. Lu Yi naturally expressed his gratitude. Going to the core region to train was a matter of time. He was currently at the 6th order, so he could still hang around in the outer region for a while. However, once he reached the 7th order, he would have to consider entering the inner region. Once he reached the 9th order one day and switched to a heaven-grade secret art, he would have to go to the core region. With the grace of this battle at Spirit Stream, there would be many places he could choose to go to in the future. After a while, everyone dispersed one after another. Only then did Lu Yi have the time to ask about the doubts in his heart. Senior brother, what kind of spirit tree is this? The fruits on it are so fragrant. When he followed Li Baxian here, he noticed that there was a fruit tree here. There were 9 fruits on the tree, and the fragrance of the fruits could be smelled from 10 miles away. Lu Yi had long known that there were precious treasures in the Chess Sea. Many of them were unique to the Chess Sea and could not be found in the 9 states or Spirit Stream battlefields. However, he had not seen any special treasures since he entered the Chess Sea. Those good things had probably been taken away by others long ago. Until now, when he saw this fruit tree, it was obviously a treasure. This is a rest fruit, Li Baxian explained. It's a good thing. Feng Yuechan also said from the side, rest fruits are very rare and can only be found in the Chess Sea. Moreover, they don't appear every time. The last time the Chess Sea opened, there were no rest fruits. Its flesh has a very strong restorative effect. Take your 4th senior brother for example. If his spirit energy is exhausted, he can probably replenish it with just a bite of the fruit. It really is amazing. Lu Yi was surprised. Although his 4th senior brother was an 8th order heaven grade master, that was because one of his spirit apertures was broken and he could not break through. All his spirit apertures had been opened, so in terms of spirit energy reserves, he was no different from other 9th order heaven grade masters. Even a master like his 4th senior brother could completely restore his spirit energy by eating a bite of the fruit. If it was a 6th order master like himself, he would probably have the same effect by simply nibbling on the skin. When fighting against a strong enemy, the recovery of spirit energy was the key. If both sides were exhausted and one side suddenly ate this rest fruit, the other side would probably die of despair. This fruit was definitely a life-saving treasure at certain times. Li Baxian said, although the flesh is precious, the true value of this rest fruit is its core. Chapter 201. What do you mean? Lu Yi asked humbly. The role of the rest fruit's core is not fixed. Some fruit cores have this role, and some fruit cores have that role. There was a sect in the Tian continent that once obtained a rest fruit. After using that fruit core, it connected them to an unknown small world. That small world had a best-grade spiritual vein, which was filled with high-grade and best-grade spirit stones. Its value was immeasurable. Some cores can let people enter a very wonderful state of cultivation. In that state, whether it's cultivating spells or doing anything else, it's twice the result with half the effort. Some cores can be sold directly to the Tianji treasure house. The starting price is 100,000 merit points. Lu Yi was shocked by this number. 100,000 merit points, how many earthen core flames would that be? And this was just the starting number. It might be more than 100,000. Some cores can be placed in some magic arrays as the core, which can increase the power of the magic array by several times. There is a second-rank sect in the core circle that was fated to obtain such cores. Their magic array is the most powerful magic array among all the sects in the spirit stream battlefield. Even those first-rank sects can't compare to it. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan talked about the various functions of the rest fruit. Lu Yi was surprised. This kind of treasure that could only be produced on the Chess Island was really extraordinary. This place was originally occupied by the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge. If there were no accidents, the Haotian Alliance would not be able to touch this rest fruit tree. However, the outstanding performance of the low-level cultivators this time made the Myriad Demons Ridge's wishful thinking fail. A few days ago, the cultivators of the Haotian Alliance, under the leadership of the powerhouses of the core circle, swept across the continent and killed countless enemies. They completely drove out the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge who occupied this place. The Myriad Demons Ridge was unwilling to let the treasure in their hands be snatched away. They had organized several attacks before, but the number of low-level and high-level cultivators on the Myriad Demons Ridge's side was far less than that of the Haotian Alliance. How could they succeed? Instead, they lost a lot of people. Now that Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan were also here, the Myriad Demons Ridge did not dare to act presumptuously. It was foreseeable that the following days would be very peaceful. The Haotian Alliance would wait here for the rest fruit to ripen and would not take the initiative to attack again. Even if the Myriad Demons Ridge was unwilling, they could only swallow their anger. The Battle of Spirit Stream Garrison was nearing its end, but before that, the rest fruit would be able to ripen. There are only 9 breath fruits. With so many sects present, how are we going to split them? Lu Yi voiced out the doubts in his heart. Everyone would want such a good item. However, low-level cultivators would not be able to compete for it. They couldn't just fight here and distribute it based on their strength. If they did that, it would only give the Myriad Devil Ridge an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Usually, auctions are used in such situations. Li Baxian had obviously experienced this kind of scene many times before, so he explained to Lu Yi, the guardian envoys will bid on behalf of their respective sects. The highest bidder will win, and the proceeds will be divided equally among the sects present. That's fine. Lu Yi nodded. Such a method was very fair. Presumably, those sects that were not competitive would also be willing to do so. No matter what, they would be able to get a share of the benefits. Time passed. Many people from the Grand Heaven Alliance were recuperating from their injuries, but there were even more who gathered in 2s and 3s to discuss matters. This kind of situation where the guardian envoys and deputy envoys of many sects were gathered together was very rare. The Battle of Spirit Stream Garrison was an opportunity. Almost all the sects that had stationed themselves on the Spirit Stream battlefield would participate. As a result, if there were any cooperation or important matters between sects, they could discuss it here. They could even form an alliance contract here. The guardian envoys were qualified to form an alliance contract. However, such an agreement was only limited to the Spirit Stream battlefield. If 2 sects wanted to truly form an alliance, then the respective sect master or sect master would have to come forward. Lu Yi and Hua Xi's side was also very lively. Many people who were familiar with each other ran over. At this moment, Lu Yi was playing with a small and exquisite mechanical creation. This thing was a round ball with a pair of small wings. It could fly, and there were 2 crystal eyes on the surface of the round ball. Lu Yushan was explaining the principles of this mechanical creation to him. This little thing didn't have much use. It could be regarded as a special spirit tool. After a cultivator refined it and released it, it could be used to observe some dangerous places. Brother Yi, if you are interested in this Tao, you can come to the Thousand Secrets Pavilion when you have time. Lu Yushan warmly invited him. They could be considered as friends who had gone through life and death together. Moreover, the Thousand Secrets Pavilion never had any intention of keeping their own inheritance to themselves. This was because Yanshi had always been a small sect. Every generation's pavilion master of the Thousand Secrets Pavilion had the responsibility of spreading the glory of this sect. Therefore, the doors of the Thousand Secrets Pavilion had always been open to the large sects of the Grand Heaven Alliance. Regardless of background, as long as one was interested in Yanshi, they could go to the Thousand Secrets Pavilion to further study. Therefore, although the Thousand Secrets Pavilion's rank wasn't high in the entire Grand Heaven Alliance, it was only at the 8th grade. However, its network was very wide. In the 9 continents, there were many sects in each continent that had formed an alliance contract with them. However, Yanshi required talent. Therefore, even though the Thousand Secrets Pavilion had been working hard for generations, the number of Yanshi was still very small. Especially after their cultivation reached a high level, the number of Yanshi fell sharply. The main reason was that Yanshi relied too heavily on external forces. When their cultivation wasn't high, they could use all kinds of mysterious mechanisms to create things to display strength far beyond their own. However, if this continued for a long time, it would definitely be detrimental to their own cultivation. It wasn't that the Thousand Secrets Pavilion didn't know about this drawback. However, they had no way to solve this problem. Yanshi was destined to spend a lot of energy on mechanisms. There was another beast-taming sect that had the same experience as Yanshi. There were also very few people in this sect. They focused on taming beasts. Since young, they had chosen a demonic beast as their life source. They ate and lived with the demonic beast. It could be said that they regarded the demonic beast as their life partner. Whether it was the Yanshi sect or the beast-taming sect, although they were a small group, they were definitely not to be trifled with. They were often able to defeat the strong. Their strength was related to the mechanisms and the demonic beast they tamed. It was impossible to judge their true ability from their cultivation base. Brother Lu. Lu Yi suddenly thought of something. Do you have a big guy over there that can allow cultivators to stay inside and work together to kill the enemy? It doesn't have to be a mechanical beast. A humanoid is also fine. And it's best if it's humanoid. You're talking about Yanshi? Lu Yi suddenly became interested. You really have it? I do have it, but I can't make it right now. I still need to continue cultivating. Lu Yushan smiled. When I can make it one day, I'll give it to you. Then I'll have to thank Brother Lu in advance. Lu Yi was looking forward to it. Yanshi, he didn't know if it was the same as what he had imagined. It was a good thing. This time, the defense of Ling Shi had opened his eyes. The more he learned, the more he found the cultivation world to be unfathomable. Although the gathering place was lively, they didn't let down their guard. Ghost cultivators concealed themselves 5 kilometers away from the breathfruit tree and monitored the surroundings to prevent people from the myriad Devil Ridge from launching a sneak attack. Although the possibility of that was low, they still had to be on guard. At a certain moment, the fruity fragrance suddenly disappeared. The cultivators who sensed it looked at the breathfruit tree and saw that the fruits had ripened. 9 blue fruits hung heavily on the branches. At the same time, the layer of barrier that had been lingering around the fruit tree also disappeared in an instant. The reason why the myriad Devil Ridge didn't destroy the breathfruit before they were defeated was mainly because the breathfruit tree had a natural protection. There was a transparent barrier around the fruit tree. Before the breathfruit ripened, this barrier would always exist. Not to mention destroying the breathfruit, they couldn't even get close to it. Otherwise, why would the myriad Devil Ridge leave such a good thing to the Grand Heaven Alliance when the situation wasn't good? If they couldn't get it, they would just destroy it. Everyone's eyes were fixed on it. Everyone's eyes were filled with desire. Although the breath fruit's core had many strange uses, every one of them had a great use. At the very least, it could be sold to the Tianji treasury for 100,000 merit points. It could be said that every breath fruit was priceless. Desire was desire, but no one went up to pick it. At this time, whoever dared to act rashly would definitely be killed immediately. Fellow Daoistly, please. Someone suddenly spoke. Everyone's gaze fell on Li Baxi. Li Baxi smiled slightly and cupped his fists in all directions. Then I'll accept your offer. He leaped into the air and searched among the 9 fruits. He didn't know if there was any difference between them. Then, he plucked one of them and took out a wooden box, putting it away carefully. Then, he came in front of Lu Yi and handed the wooden box over. Little junior brother, junior sister Hua Xi, this is yours. Lu Yi looked at him in shock. Li Baxi smiled. You and junior sister Hua Xi have made such a great contribution this time. The major sects can't just thank you verbally. We've discussed it before, and you'll get a share of the breath fruit. Meng Si also looked at Lu Yi and nodded. This is what the Jade Blood sect deserves. Accept it. Lu Ye's gaze swept across and saw pairs of eyes full of smiles and praise. This sudden happiness surprised Lu Yi. He naturally wanted a good item like the breath fruit. However, his 4th senior brother had said that the ownership of the breath fruit would be decided through an auction. The cultivators here would represent their respective sects to bid, and the highest bidder would get the breath fruit. Currently, the Jade Blood sect's population was declining. Apart from a few small fries and a few spiritual mountains, there was nothing good in the sect. How could they have the capital to participate in such an auction? He originally thought that it would be good to share the profits from the auction with everyone. It should be a considerable gain. Who would have thought that such a good thing would fall into his lap? The 2 from the Jade Blood sect had made a great contribution to the defense of Spirit Creek. Without them, the current situation would not have happened. When the Chess Island completed its final fusion to form a continent, the high-level cultivators were hiding from the myriad Devil Ridge's pursuit. Even Li Baxi had brought a few dozen people to seek refuge with Lu Yi, let alone the others. It was the low-level cultivators who fought at the periphery that extinguished the myriad Devil Ridge's arrogance and turned the tables. Verbal thanks were no longer enough to express the gratitude of the major sects for such a contribution. A breath fruit was the real deal. Just as Meng Si had said, they deserved it. Chapter 202. With such a treasure in front of him, Lu Yi really could not refuse. He took the wooden box from Li Baxi and turned to hand it to Hua Xi. He cupped his fists and said, Senior brothers and sisters, we will remember your kindness. Thank you very much. Li Baxi smiled and said, since you've obtained a breath fruit, you won't get any of the benefits from the auction. It's only right. Lu Yi did not desire the benefits from the auction. The value of 1 breath fruit was enough. If he wanted more, he would be ignorant. Li Baxi looked around and said, I will be the host of this auction. Does anyone have any objections? Who could have any objections? Among the people present, there might be some who were older than Li Baxi, but the older ones were not as strong as him. There was no one younger than him. He was ranked 10th on the spirit stream list. Last time, he fought with Yan Xing, who was ranked 2nd, and both sides were injured. Among the people present, only Feng Yuechan could compete with him. But everyone knew Feng Yuechan's feelings for Li Baxi. How could she tear down Li Baxian's stage? Moreover, this was something that had been discussed before. Everyone applauded. Li Baxi took up the role of host and said, now, the auction for the first breath fruit begins. Those who are interested, please bid. Feng Yuechan immediately shouted with a smile, Pill Heart Sect, 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones. Just as she finished speaking, she was covered by another voice, Heaven Yuan Sect, 13,000. Green Void Sect, 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones, plus 5 kilograms of Jade Sky Godly Iron. The scene became extremely heated. Those who bid were basically from the large sects in the core circle. They had deep foundations and rich families. The sects in the inner circle and outer circle could not be compared to them. The foundation of a sect was not something that could be accumulated in 1 or 2 generations. It required the continuous efforts of generations. Now, among the first, second, and third rank sects in the 9 regions, which one of them did not reach this step by step? No one was born strong. Most of the bids were based on high-grade spirit stones, but there were also some special natural treasures that Lu Yi had never heard of before. As for upper-grade spirit stones, he had never seen them before. Currently, all the spirit stones he had obtained were of the lower grade. It was said that above the lower grade was the middle grade, and above the middle grade was the upper grade. There was also an even more special type of supreme grade spirit stone. The auction continued under this intense yet peaceful atmosphere. After rounds of bidding, the first respiration fruit was won by a large sect of the Mist Province. After Li Baxian announced this, the guardian emissaries of the sect clasped their fists in the surroundings. "Thank you for letting me win." With a face full of smiles, he flew up and searched carefully. He plucked a breath fruit and took out a container to seal it. What happened next was none of his business. Breath fruit after breath fruit was sold. This auction lasted for a full 2 hours. When it came to the last few breath fruits, Lu Yi could clearly feel that the guardian envoys had increased the price. In the end, the 8 people who obtained the breath fruit were jubilant. Those who didn't obtain it weren't that dejected either. That was because no one knew whether spending such a large price to bid for the breath fruit was a profit or a loss. The only one who made a profit was the Jade Blood sect. The guardian envoys all represented the sects behind them, so they obviously could not cash out their bids immediately. They still needed to return to the battlefield of the Spirit Stream and the 9 provinces and report to their sections. Afterwards, the people of their sects would come forward to gather the items and distribute them. This matter would obviously be left to the Grand Heaven Alliance. They had capable people who specialized in handling matters like this. Not only were the sects represented by the guardian envoys sharing the profits from the auction, but there were also those who had died in battle. It was possible to say that all the sects that had taken part in the Battle of the Spirit Stream this time would benefit a little. However, after splitting it evenly, the benefits would not be too great. "Little junior brother, give the breath fruit to second senior sister after you bring it back. She'll deal with the flesh," Li Baxian instructed from within the crowd. "I understand." Li Baxian patted his shoulder. "You're growing very quickly, but you have to calm down and find some time to settle down." "Yes." Rumbling noises rang out from all directions as the entire continent trembled. The huge continent began to disintegrate into chess islands. The battle to defend Lingxi had come to an end. Lu Yi could clearly feel the scenery around him begin to distort and blur, as if it was beginning to overlap with another space. "Fourth senior brother, senior sister Feng, take care." Lu Yi cupped his fists. Hua Xi stood beside him and also bowed to the 2 of them. "Take care." Li Baxian nodded. Sounds of farewells came from all directions. Lu Yi turned his head and saw Lan Yudi, Gao Tai, and Lu Yushan. He gently waved his hand. The distortion and overlapping of space became even more severe. When Lu Yi and Hua Xi's vision blurred, the 2 of them found themselves standing in the heavenly secret hall of the Jade Blood sect's encampment. The bustling crowd around them had disappeared. There was a mechanical wolf by Hua Xi's side, and the mechanical wolf's body was filled with storage bags. They turned their heads and looked at each other with a smile. The Battle of the Spirit Stream lasted for a month. This period of time could be said to be rich and colorful, and it was destined to be an unforgettable experience for the 2 of them. "You two, you've finally returned." A voice called out from outside the hall. Lu Yi turned his head and saw that it was Qin Yu. Lu Yi ordered Hua Xi, "Return to the sect first and report your safety to sect master and second senior sister. I'll be back soon." "And, Hua Xi nodded and used the heavenly secret pillar to return to the sect, her figure disappearing. Lu Yi walked out and sat down on the steps outside the hall, his body and mind relaxing as he said, "If you want to wait for someone, just wait inside. Why are you always sneaking around outside?" The encampment was always the safest place. During the Battle of the Spirit Stream encampment, Lu Yi had been tense all this time, but only now could he completely relax. Chen Yu hurriedly said, "Jade Blood Sect has allowed us loose cultivators to stay in the encampment. We are already very grateful, so how could we casually set foot in an important place like the Heavenly Secret Hall?" The loose cultivators were all very good, or rather, under Chen Yu's management, the loose cultivators were very self-aware. Even if the encampment had been empty for several decades, no loose cultivator dared to come and take over the place. "What's the matter?" Lu Yi stretched his neck and asked casually. After meeting several times, they were not unfamiliar with each other, and Lu Yi had even entrusted Chen Yu with spirit stones to buy spirit pills. Chen Yu smiled and said, "I heard that the Jade Blood Sect is recruiting disciples." Lu Yi glanced at him and said, "You're quite well informed." Second senior sister had indeed said before that the Jade Blood Sect had not recruited any disciples in the past, as she and the sect master had been waiting for the sect's name to be removed. But now that Lu Yi, Hua Xi, and the others had made this opening, they might as well make it bigger. As a guardian, Lu Yi was qualified to recruit disciples from the Spirit Stream battlefield. Of course, the disciples he recruited were only nominal disciples, and they would need to undergo a period of assessment before they could become official disciples. In addition, Shui Yuan had also said that there were many loose cultivators who wanted to attach themselves to the Jade Blood Sect, so Lu Yi should recruit as many loose cultivators as possible. This was related to the future development of the sect, and if the sect encountered any problems, he would have some available helpers. Before, because he had to participate in the Spirit Stream battlefield, Lu Yi had not been in the mood to deal with these matters, but he had never thought that before he had even begun, the news would have already spread. Obviously, it was either Kong Niu or Wan Lingyu who had leaked the news, with the latter being more likely as the little girl liked to run to the market. "Is that true?" Chen Yu showed a look of surprise. "What? Do you want to join the Jade Blood Sect?" Lu Yi looked at him in surprise. "I have such an idea, but I don't know if I will have the opportunity. With your 7th order cultivation, it shouldn't be difficult for you to join any sect, so why do you want to join the Jade Blood Sect?" Chen Yu smiled bitterly. The big sects are actually more willing to train their disciples from the beginning, so they will have a higher degree of loyalty and recognition to their sect. For someone like me, even if I join a sect, I won't receive much attention. Which sect lacks a 7th order? This was true. The outer sects, even 9th grade sects, had many 7th order or 8th order masters, but they were rarely seen as they had all gone to the inner circle for life experience. For someone like Chen Yu, he was qualified to be a guardian of a 9th grade sect, but which sect would trust him? Lu Yi couldn't help but think of Dong Shuyi. This guy used to be the guardian of 9 Stars sect, but later he joined another force and became the personal guard of a young master of that force. How sad was that? I have been here since I was a 2nd order, and now I am a 7th order. After such a long time, I have some feelings for this place. It's not just me, but many of the rogue cultivators here are like this. We rogue cultivators don't belong to any sect, and we don't have anyone to rely on, but because of this place, we have gathered together to form a force that relies on each other. Even if the Jade Blood Sect has never cared about us, we have already been sheltered by the Jade Blood Sect. With Little Grey here, which sect from the Myriad Demons Ridge would dare to provoke them with Little Grey here? So, I was thinking, if the Jade Blood Sect really opens its doors and accepts disciples, can they consider rogue cultivators like us first? Our talent may be worse than others, but we have more of a sense of belonging and recognition to the Jade Blood Sect. It's just that we have never dared to call ourselves disciples of the Jade Blood Sect, Chen Yu said sincerely. Is this your personal opinion? Chen Yu shook his head. It's not just me, there are many others who think so, and they asked me to ask about it. Lu Yi supported his chin with one hand and rested the other on his knee, his expression relaxed as he tapped his knee lightly with his finger. Then, do you know that the Jade Blood sect is not an ordinary 9th grade sect? If you are branded with the Jade Blood sect's brand, you will definitely encounter more danger than others in the future. You must have heard about what I encountered on the Golden Light Peak last time. Qin Yu said, how can there be no risks on the path of cultivation? Now, we don't have any sect's brand, but if we encounter a master from Myriad Demon Ridge, can they spare us? We have naturally heard of fellow Yi Ye's feat on the Golden Light Peak and admire you greatly. We rogue cultivators don't have such great ability, but if we are lucky enough to join the Jade Blood sect, we can still defend the prestige of our sect to the death. Chapter 203. In front of the Tianji Hall, Lu Yi pondered for a moment. I'll go back and ask the sect master about the recruitment of disciples. I'll let you know when there's news. He didn't immediately give an answer. Then I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist Yi Yi. After Qin Yu left, Lu Yi was about to check his harvest when a message came from the battlefield imprint. He opened it and saw that it was a message from his second senior sister. Time to go home and eat. Thinking of the delicious food his second senior sister had made, Lu Yi stood up and walked to the Tianji pillar. He pressed his hand on it and returned to the sect in the next moment. Second senior sister must have prepared a table full of food and was waiting for Lu Yi and Hua Xi to return. Lu Yi first went to pay his respects to the sect master. Hua Xi had already gone back to report to the sect master that she was safe. However, the sect master still looked Lu Yi up and down. After confirming that Lu Yi was unharmed, he nodded in satisfaction. Go and eat. Your second senior sister made a lot of delicious food. He didn't ask about Lu Ye's experience in the battle at Lingxi. To him, it was good enough that his few disciples could return safely. He didn't ask for anything else. Yes. The dining table was bustling with noise and excitement. The few remaining disciples of the Jade Blood sect were all gathered here. The group of people were eating delicious food and chatting happily. Hoopa stood outside the door and looked at the mechanical wolf that Hua Xi had brought back. Then, he pounced on the mechanical wolf and pushed it to the ground. He stepped on it with his claws and looked proud. At the same time, in the sect master's bedroom, the sect master, who was meditating, opened his eyes and sensed his imprint. It was actually Pang Zhen who sent a message. Old Tang, the Blue Blood sect has accepted 2 good disciples. The sect master frowned, not understanding the message. Judging from Pang Zhen's words, it seemed like Lu Yi and Hua Xi had done something incredible in the battle at Lingxi. Just as he was about to ask about it, another message came. This time, it was from the old man from the Pill Heart sect. When will the Jade Blood sect be disbanded? Your disciples, Lu Yi and Hua Xi, this old man wants them. Scram! The sect master retorted. Immediately afterward, messages continuously came from the imprint. Those messages were all from the sect masters or sect masters of the various major sects in the 9 regions, so the sect master had no time to investigate. After a long time, the dense flow of information had thinned out a little, but there was still a steady flow of information. The sect master looked through the messages one by one, some of which were congratulatory messages, some of which were expressing their gratitude on behalf of their disciples, and some of which were offering to form an alliance with the Blue Blood sect. The sect master was really confused. However, judging from the information that was revealed, the 2 disciples under him had indeed done something big. It was related to many sects and even the entire Haotian alliance. As for what exactly it was, he did not know at the moment. After finding Pang Zhen's insignia, the hall master sent a telepathic message over. What's going on? Pang Zhen quickly replied, Elder Tang, you still don't know? Didn't your 2 disciples return? He has returned. Since you've already returned, why don't you ask him in person? The kids are having a meal together. It's not good for an old man to disturb them. Tell me. Pang Zhen then recounted the events that had transpired during the battle at Spirit Creek. The sect master stared at him in a daze. After a long silence, he suddenly burst into laughter. He really didn't expect that Lu Yi and Hua Xiai, two mere sixth-order cultivators, would be able to create such a big storm in the chess sea. Originally, he only wanted Lu Yi and Hua Xiai to broaden their horizons, but who would have thought that these two little fellows would indirectly save the fate of the entire Grand Heaven Alliance for the next few decades. Such a great achievement was rarely seen in 100 years, and only his eldest disciple's cauldron settling battle 40 years ago could compare to it. Unfortunately, his eldest disciple ended up losing all standing and reputation. He even implicated the sect and gradually became a sinner. Today, after several decades, the actions of the two disciples of the Blue Blood sect could be considered as washing away the sins of the sect. The sect master was truly gratified and happy. Elder Tang, I have already passed down the order. The news will be sealed and will not be spread. We will try our best not to let Myriad Demon Ridge focus on the Blue Blood sect. Peng Zhen sent another message. Thank you for your trouble, the sect master replied. Protecting the younger generation is just like how you protected us in the past. It's only right. After ending the message with Peng Zhen, the sect master busied himself for a while, replying to the sect masters who sent him messages one by one before he walked out of the hall. In the food hall, Lu Yi and the others were eating when a figure appeared at the door. It was the sect master. Everyone quickly got up. The sect master raised his hand and gestured with a smile, eat your food. He turned to Shui Yuan, go get some good ingredients. This old master's hands are a little itchy today, so I'll show you my cooking skills. Saying so, he walked towards the kitchen. The group looked at each other. Lu Yi looked at his second senior sister in astonishment. Sect master is cooking? Shui Yuan pursed her lips and smiled. My cooking skills were all taught by the old man. You guys eat first. Saying so, she chased after the sect master. She was puzzled. Why does the old man seem to be very happy today? Could it be that he had buried the hatchet with Madame Yun and the old tree had bloomed? Everyone ate until their stomachs were full. No one expected that the dignified sect master of the Jade Blood sect, a great cultivator in the Divine Ocean realm, would have such excellent cooking skills. Yi poked Ruan Lingyu's bulging belly with her hand, making Lingyu cry out in pain. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Lu Yi greeted his second senior sister and the others, walked into his room, and fell asleep immediately. In the chess sea, neither he nor Hua Xiai had much time to rest. After a month, both of them were physically and mentally exhausted. In a daze, his nose itched. When he opened his eyes, he saw Yi poking his nostrils with a strand of his hair. Lu Yi slowly got up and sat there with a blank look on his face. Yi brought him some water to wash his face, wetted a towel, and handed it to him. Wake up. You've been sleeping for a day and a night. Seeing that he didn't respond, Yi put the towel on his face and rubbed it vigorously. I'm awake. Stimulated by the cold water, Lu Yi immediately sobered up. He took the towel and got out of bed. How have you been? Lu Yi asked as he washed his face. Yi stood beside him with her hands behind her back, humming a little tune. Pretty good. It's just that you and big sister Hua Xiai aren't here, so it's a little less lively. Her days were really comfortable now. Thinking back to the first time she met Lu Yi on Azure Cloud Mountain, Yi felt that it was simply a fated encounter. If she hadn't met Lu Yi, she and Hupo would still be on Azure Cloud Mountain. Perhaps they would be captured by some cultivator one day. If that really happened, she didn't even dare to think about the consequences. Although there were many thrills and dangers along the way with Lu Yi, now that they were in the Jade Blood sect, they had the sect master's senior sister's protection and the Lingyu and Hupa as playmates. Their days were very comfortable. Lu Yi put away the towel and suddenly turned to look at Yi seriously. What's wrong? Yi was confused by his stare. Lu Yi reached out, pinched her face, and pinched it. What are you doing? Yi asked in a muffled voice. This feeling. It's becoming more and more indistinguishable from your physical body. Lu Ye's eyes revealed a surprised expression. Also, have you gotten fatter? Yi suddenly panicked. No, you're talking nonsense. She patted her cheeks unconfidently, her eyes suspicious. And, you've indeed gotten fatter. You've even gotten a little bigger. Lu Yi nodded seriously. Can you still grow like this? Yi was stunned for a moment, then her face turned red. Where are you looking? Could it be related to Hupa? Lu Yi rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought. After returning this time, Hupo's aura had become much stronger, and he immediately asked him for the scale armor. Lu Yi naturally didn't refuse. He took out the scale armor and let Hupa suck a mouthful of blood energy. As expected, he lay hard on the ground again, looking very intoxicated. I'll go tell big sister Hua Xi that you're acting like a pervert. Yi stomped her foot and ran out. Lu Yi walked out of the room feeling refreshed and bumped into Wan Lingyu. The little girl glared at Lu Yi and even deliberately walked in front of him. She put her hands on her hips and stomped her feet, then snorted loudly to express her dissatisfaction with Lu Yi for bullying her little sister. Are you done cultivating for today? Lu Yi lowered his head and looked at her. Wan Lingyu immediately felt a little guilty. No, I haven't started yet. Then hurry up and cultivate. Oh. The little girl ran towards the Tianji Hall, feeling wronged, her two braids swaying from side to side. Second senior sister, Lu Yi greeted Shui Yuan, who was walking over. Shui Yuan handed over a somewhat familiar wooden box. The flesh of the rest fruit is being processed, so it will take some time. Take this core. I don't know what it's used for at the moment, so you'll need to use your spiritual power to figure it out yourself. Some cores will recognize their master. Whoever activates its power first will be recognized as their master. It was precisely because of this consideration that Shui Yuan didn't dare to rashly investigate the use of the core. The flesh of the rest fruit had an extremely strong restorative effect, but it would be a waste to eat it directly like that. However, it was different when the fruit reached second senior sister. Not only was Shui Yuan a medical cultivator, but she was also a pill cultivator. With her level of pharmacology, she could naturally make good use of the fruit. Speaking of which, besides the sect master and Yi, the Jade Blood sect only had a total of 6 disciples. Medical cultivators occupied 2 of them, which was a strange thing. The other sects had the least number of medical cultivators. Taking the wooden box, Lu Yi gently opened it and found a piece of glowing blue, crystal-like thing lying inside. At first glance, this thing was no different from a piece of sapphire. He looked up at Shui Yuan, who said, "This is the core of the rest fruit." Lu Yi could only sigh. As expected of the rest fruit, it really couldn't be judged with common sense. Give it a try. Shui Yuan was also very curious about the use of this fruit core. Lu Yi nodded and picked up the blue core. Holding it in the palm of his hand, he poured his spiritual power into it. The next moment, a familiar feeling came over him. It was the same feeling he had every time he entered the Tianji treasury. Chapter 204. After entering the Tianji treasure trove, he entered with his consciousness while his body was still outside. After using his spirit power to activate the breath fruit core, the situation was surprisingly similar. However, compared to when he entered the Tianji treasure trove, it felt more real. It was as if he was really standing here and everything was no different from the outside world. Lu Yi first tried to sense his body. Only after he could feel it did he feel relieved to look around. He was in a small room, and there was nothing around him. He searched the room for a moment and confirmed that there was nothing here. Only then did he stand before a door. This was the only door in this place, and he didn't know where it led. Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed on the door. With a light push, the door opened. However, a line of words suddenly appeared on the door. Looking at it, he saw that it said, "To enter the Mirage Realm, you need to spend 50 merit points." Lu Yi was stunned. The meaning was obvious. If he wanted to open the door, he would need to spend 50 merit points. This price wasn't low. One had to know that his mountain plate saber only cost 138 merit points. However, the price wasn't low, which meant that there might be a good harvest. The entrance fee was 50 merit points. What kind of treasures were hidden behind this door? Thinking of what Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan said, Lu Yi was secretly looking forward to it. It would be best if there was a spirit vein behind this door that could produce all kinds of high-grade and peak-grade spirit stones. Thinking of this, Lu Yi pushed open the door. The battlefield imprint on the back of his hand was slightly warm. Lu Yi didn't check it. He guessed that his merit points had been deducted. He also felt this when he bought things from the Tianji treasure trove. After pushing open the door, Lu Yi stepped out. What he saw stunned him. A moment later, Lu Yi woke up. It was as if a needle had pierced his brain. The pain was unbearable. Shui Yuan, who had been standing beside him, hurriedly asked, "Are you okay?" Lu Yi shook his head. He felt that his brain was shaking. What is this breath fruit core used for? Shui Yuan couldn't help but be curious when she saw that he looked like he had fought someone and lost. Lu Yi told her about his previous encounter. Shui Yuan's eyes were filled with surprise. The breath fruit core has such a use. Let me see. Taking the core from Lu Ye's hand, she sat down cross-legged and held the core in her hand, her spiritual power surging. Lu Yi stood to the side and waited. As time passed, the stabbing pain in his head slowly disappeared. However, there was still some lingering effect that made him feel uncomfortable. After a full 2 hours, Shui Yuan let out a light breath and opened her eyes. Her complexion was slightly pale. She passed the breath fruit core to Lu Yi and said with some exhaustion, "This is a good thing. If you use it well, it can quickly improve your fighting skills. However, it will consume too much of your mind. Be careful and don't get hurt." Yes. Lu Yi put away the breath fruit core. Although the previous encounter couldn't be considered pleasant, and it could even be said that he had wasted 50 merit points, he also realized that this breath fruit core was a good thing. Just as second senior sister had said, if this thing was used well, it could quickly improve his fighting skills, and this was what he needed at the moment. More importantly, this thing didn't recognize an owner. Anyone who took it could use it. In this way, as long as one had enough merit points, they could use this thing to temper themselves. This was where its true value lay. By the way, senior sister, last time you said that loose cultivators would rely on the sect for recruitment. The loose cultivators in the market seem to have heard some news and are asking about it. Shui Yuan said, "Now that you are the garrison's guardian, you can make your own decisions. You don't need to ask for my permission." Senior sister, aren't you afraid that I will destroy the sect? Shui Yuan said with a smile, the sect was originally about to be removed. With you, it barely retained its 9th stage rank. So, you can do whatever you want. I know. Lu Yi nodded. With second senior sister's words, he didn't have any burden. After bidding farewell to Shui Yuan, Lu Yi entered the sect's garrison with the help of the Divine Pillar and sent out a few messages. Soon, Hua Xiai and the others gathered and stood in a row in front of him. Lu Yi looked at the few faces and said, "For now, there are only a few of us in the sect. In the entire 9 states, the Jade Blood sect is probably the first. No other sect has fewer people than us. If the sect wants to develop, we must first ensure the number of disciples. Only with more people will the sect have a future. So, I have decided to recruit more disciples for the sect. Who agrees and who disagrees?" Yi immediately raised a hand. "I agree." Hupa, who was squatting beside him, also responded with a whimper. Lu Yi gave her a look of approval. As Yi's best playmate, Wan Lingyu naturally raised both her hands in agreement. The dull Kong Niu also raised a hand. Everyone looked at Hua Xiai. Hua Xiai said helplessly, "You are the garrison's guardian. You can decide these things yourself. Why did you call us here?" "That won't do. Although I am the garrison's guardian, the sect belongs to everyone. I can't have the final say. Also, fellow Taoist Hua Xiai, please correct your attitude." Hua Xiai was confused. "What's wrong with me?" Lu Yi looked at her seriously. "I am the garrison's guardian, but don't forget that you are the deputy. The mark on the back of your hand is the Jade Blood sect's. With this mark, you will share the sect's honor and disgrace. You will also have to contribute to the sect's development and share my burdens and difficulties." Hua Xiai thought about it seriously and nodded. "What you said makes sense. I am used to being undisciplined in Ing Mountain and have yet to adapt to my new identity. It's good that you have this attitude." Lu Yi gave her a look of affirmation. "It seems that no one has any objections. In that case, the sect's recruitment will officially begin. Deputy Hua Xiai, please come up with a constitution and recruitment plan as soon as possible. There will be many loose cultivators in the market who want to join the sect, but the Jade Blood sect is not a place that anyone can join. There will be some requirements. As for what the requirements are, everyone can discuss it. Are there any other questions?" Hua Xiai looked at him suspiciously. "Yes. Speak. I will be responsible for the recruitment." "What are you going to do?" Lu Yi said, "As the garrison's guardian, I am also the face of the sect. My task is very difficult. I need to improve my cultivation as soon as possible. Otherwise, it won't be good for the sect's garrison to be at the 7th order while we are only at the 6th order." The group of people looked at him with disdain. Lu Yi acted as if he didn't see them and shouted, "Since no one has any questions, let's disperse. Everyone, get moving. We need to be efficient. Time waits for no one." While Hua Xiai and the others gathered to discuss the recruitment, Lu Yi ran to the cultivation rooms. He didn't cultivate as he had said. Instead, he set up spirit-gathering spirit runes in the cultivation rooms. Right now, Hua Xiai and the others had their own cultivation rooms. In addition to the spirit-gathering spirit arrays in their rooms, there were also the spirit-gathering spirit runes that Lu Yi had set up on the 3 walls. With this two-pronged approach, the efficiency of cultivation would be very high. Currently, there were only a few people in the sect. These exclusive cultivation rooms were enough, but when the sect recruited new members and a large number of loose cultivators joined, it would definitely not be enough. The sect was currently recruiting loose cultivators. These guys didn't have much talent, so their cultivation efficiency wasn't high. If they wanted to grow quickly, spirit-gathering spirit runes were the best choice. If a sect wanted to become strong, it wasn't something that could be done by one or a few people. Only by improving the overall strength of the sect could it be possible. If the Jade Blood sect wanted to develop, it needed to pay attention to these basic cultivation facilities, and this was a problem that Lu Yi could solve. While Lu Yi set up spirit-gathering spirit runes in the cultivation room, Hua Xiai and the others discussed the recruitment standards and regulations. In just half a day, the general standards were out. Lu Yi took a look and felt that there weren't many problems. However, to be safe, he still asked Hua Xiai and the others to ask senior sister Shui Yuan. A day later, Wan Lingyu came to the market in the encampment. When the loose cultivators saw her, they greeted her warmly and stuffed delicious food into her hands. Lingyu often came here, so she was more familiar with the loose cultivators in the market. Everyone also knew that she was a disciple of the Jade Blood sect, so their attitude was naturally polite. At the entrance of the market square, there was a notice wall, which was erected by the loose cultivators of the market square. There were some messy notices pasted on the notice wall. Some wanted to buy some flowers and plants, some wanted to seek companions to go out and gain experience, and so on. Lingyu went straight to the place, took out a notice from her storage bag, and pasted it on. Seeing this, a female cultivator laughed and said, "Little Lingyu, what are you pasting? Did you lose something? Did Lingyu lose something? What did you lose? Everyone, help look for it." The loose cultivators nearby became lively. "I didn't lose anything. This is a notice for our Jade Blood sect to recruit new disciples," Lingyu said as she pasted the notice neatly on the wall. The female cultivator laughed. "So, the Jade Blood sect is recruiting new disciples." Suddenly, she came to a realization and quickly leaned against the notice wall to take a look. She only glanced at it twice before hurriedly running in the direction of the Tianji Hall. At the same time, loose cultivators rushed over from all directions, and Ruan Lingyu was squeezed out. "The Jade Blood sect is recruiting!" Someone shouted excitedly. One person spread to 10 to 100, and the entire market was in an uproar in a very short time. At this moment, in front of the encampment's Tianji Hall, Hua Xi sat behind a table with a booklet in front of her. Kong Niu sat on the other side of the table with a booklet in front of him. Yi sat on the other side of the table. Chen Yu stood at the side, smiling foolishly. As the manager of the market and the cultivator with the highest cultivation base in the entire market, he was naturally the first to be recorded in the booklet. The first line on the first page of Hua Xi's booklet was his origin, name, and cultivation base. At this moment, he was standing here to help maintain order. On the other hand, he was more familiar with the loose cultivators and could help to identify some information. In just a moment of waiting, cultivators could be seen rushing over from the direction of the market. The first to run here was the female cultivator who was talking to Lingyu. She panted as she came to the table and asked anxiously, "Do I sign up here?" Chapter 205. The front of the Tianji Hall, which used to be deserted, suddenly became very lively. Rogue cultivators lined up in 3 rows and registered with Hua Xi, Yi, and Kong Niu. They registered their basic information, including their name, origin, cultivation, how long they had been cultivating, their talent, and so on. It did not mean that they would join the Jade Blood sect after registration. If that were the case, it would be too simple. What they were doing now was just the most basic statistics. Who among these people would join the Jade Blood sect in the end would have to be discussed by Lu Yi and Hua Xi. When night fell, the rogue cultivators in front of the Tianji Hall dispersed. All the registration had been completed. In front of the Tianji Hall, Lu Yi sat on the steps and read a booklet. Suddenly, he frowned. Who registered this? The handwriting on the booklet was extremely ugly. Lu Yi had to read some of the words carefully before he could read them. "It's me." A muffled voice sounded. Lu Yi looked up and saw Kong Niu. Their eyes met, and Kong Niu smiled at Lu Yi. Lu Yi was speechless. After putting away the booklet, Lu Yi said, "Everyone has worked hard. Hua Xi and Chen Yu can stay. The rest of you can leave." After a busy day, Yi, Ruan Lingyu, and Kong Niu left. The first 2 returned to the sect, while Kong Niu went to the practice room. He was a very hard-working person. Other than going back to the sect for meals, he spent most of his time in the practice room. In the past, he had followed Hua Xi in Ing Mountain and did not have a good environment for cultivation. Things were different when he came to the Jade Blood sect. Not only did he not lack cultivation resources, but the spirit chi of heaven and earth in the practice room was also very rich. These conditions were not comparable to those in Ing Mountain. Kong Niu cherished the present very much. In front of the Tianji Hall, Lu Yi, Hua Xi, and Chen Yu were screening the people who could be accepted into the sect. Chen Yu knew more about the rogue cultivators in the market. He did not dare to say that he knew their character like the back of his hand, but at least he knew more than Lu Yi and Hua Xi. With his help in screening, the quality of the new disciples would undoubtedly be better ensured. There were 432 rogue cultivators in the makeshift market, and there were also 432 people who had registered in the 3 booklets. In other words, all the rogue cultivators had come to register. This kind of enthusiasm was beyond Lu Ye's expectations. He thought that it would be good if half of the rogue cultivators came to register. The three of them busied themselves until the middle of the night, drafting a preliminary list of 100 people to be accepted into the sect. As for those who were not chosen, if they were willing to join the sect, they could do so. If they were unwilling, they would not force them. However, looking at the enthusiasm of the rogue cultivators today, as long as they were allowed to join the sect, they would definitely not refuse. In the spirit stream battlefield, many rogue cultivators would choose to attach themselves to one of the sections. That way, they would be able to use the basic facilities of the sect. For example, they would be able to practice cultivation in the cultivation rooms, build their own residences, and enjoy the blessings of the heavens workings pillars provided by the sect. Of course, when the sect was in trouble, the rogue cultivators would have to do their part and follow orders. For example, if the sect's base was declared war, the rogue cultivators who had joined would have to participate in the war. If they refused, they would be stripped of their names. It could be said that each sect's base on the spirit stream battlefield had three types of personnel. The first type was the disciples of the sect, the second type was the cultivators from the alliance, and the last type was the rogue cultivators who had joined the sect. The biggest difference between the former and the latter two was that they would receive a monthly salary from the sect, which would give them more cultivation resources. However, there was no need to worry if they were not chosen in the first batch. Since the Jade Blood sect had opened its doors and was accepting disciples, they would definitely continue to accept disciples. As long as they performed well, they would have a chance. Chen Yu posted the list of 100 people on the notice wall of the makeshift market that very night. Those whose names were on the list were naturally overjoyed, while those whose names were not were naturally disappointed. Perhaps joining the Jade Blood sect was a good choice. Chen Yu also deliberately revealed that the Jade Blood sect would continue to accept disciples in the future, so the rogue cultivators could wait with peace of mind. Lu Yi returned to the sect and reported the progress of the recruitment to his senior sister Shui Yuan. At the same time, he also received some spirit stones and spirit pills from his senior sister Shui Yuan. The next day, in the Heaven's secret hall of the Jade Blood sect's base, Lu Yi and Hua Xiai stood in front of 100 cultivators lined up below them. Chen Yu was at the very front. 100 pairs of eyes stared at them and Lu Yi loudly said, "From today onwards, you are all registered disciples of the Jade Blood sect and are no longer rogue cultivators with no one to rely on. I hope that you can advance and retreat together with the sect, sharing glory and disgrace. Today, we are proud of the sect, and perhaps one day, the sect will be proud of us. I await that day, Sect Master awaits that day, and I also believe that as long as everyone works together, that day will definitely come." Yes. Everyone below shouted in unison. Lu Yi nodded with satisfaction. "Those whose names are called, come forward." Hua Xiai called out a name and a pleasant voice called out, "Chen Yu. Disciple is here." Chen Yu immediately stepped forward. Lu Yi took out a large seal. This was the seal of his guardian envoy. Using the power of Heaven's secret, he stamped it on the back of Chen Yu's hand before taking out a few spirit stones and spirit pills from the side and handing them to him. This was the monthly salary of a registered disciple and had been allocated by Shui Yuan last night. It wasn't much, not even enough for half a month of cultivation, but this was a benefit that every sect had. Lu Yi urged, "Cultivate well." "Yes," Chen Yu solemnly accepted. "Shanghai. Disciple is here." Lu Wu. Names were called out one by one and Lu Yi stamped his guardian envoy seal on the back of each person's hand before distributing their monthly salary. Everyone was in high spirits. Looking at the 100 people gathered in the hall, Lu Ye's heart was filled with a myriad of emotions. The general framework of the station had been set up, but if he wanted to truly develop it, there was still a long way to go. The strength of these rogue cultivators wasn't too high. Below Chen Yu, there were only a few 6th-order cultivators and not many 5th-order cultivators. On top of that, these rogue cultivators weren't very talented, so their cultivation efficiency was worrying. However, if their talent wasn't enough, they could make up for it with world energy. Lu Yi was still arranging the spirit-gathering spirit runes in the cultivation room, so as long as the world energy density in the station increased, the efficiency of these disciples' early cultivation would not necessarily be worse than others. The registration of the 100 disciples was quickly completed, and after they left, the hundreds of rogue cultivators who had been waiting outside poured into the hall. These rogue cultivators were attached to Blue Blood Sect Station, so compared to the 100 disciples, they didn't have a monthly salary and were treated worse. For example, the cultivation room was given priority to the sect's disciples. Leaving the rogue cultivators to Hua Xiai, Lu Yi left the hall and went to the cultivation room to arrange the spirit-gathering spirit runes. It wasn't until late in the evening that Hua Xiai sent word that the rogue cultivators had been dealt with. Lu Yi hurried back to Sky's secret hall where Hua Xiai was waiting. Let's begin. What he needed to do now was to increase the world energy density in the station, which was also the biggest gain he and Hua Xiai had obtained from participating in the Battle of Spirit Creek. The reason why he hadn't increased it when he returned was mainly because if the cultivation environment here improved, it would affect the rogue cultivator's choice. Facts proved that he had worried too much. All the rogue cultivators in the makeshift city had either become Blue Blood Sect's registered disciples or chose to attach themselves to Blue Blood Sect, without exception. Moreover, once the news spread out, more rogue cultivators would definitely rush over. The basic world energy density in any sect station was 10% higher than in the wild, and if one wanted to increase the world energy density, they would have to buy a Sky Secret Pillar. Before the Battle of Spirit Creek, Lu Yi had spent 500 merit points to buy a Sky Secret Pillar as a bargaining chip to participate in the Battle of Spirit Creek. Now, the world energy density in their sect station was 20% higher than in the wild. He had tried to buy another Sky Secret Pillar, but he didn't have any merit points left. However, the feedback he received was that it would cost 1,000 merit points. Lu Yi vaguely felt that the denser the world energy was, the more merit points he would have to spend to buy a Sky Secret Pillar. His fourth senior brother had also said so. Checking the marks on his body, he and Hua Xiai had obtained a total of 88 Sky Secret Pillars during the Battle of Spirit Creek. Each of these Sky Secret Pillars was the most basic Sky Secret Pillar and was worth 500 merit points. These Sky Secret Pillars could be exchanged for merit points, but because they were the property of the sect, they could only be exchanged for sect merit points and could not be directly exchanged for personal merit points. The two could be exchanged in a certain way. For example, Lu Yi could donate his personal merit points and convert them into sect merit points for the Blue Blood Sect, which would then be deposited in the Sky Secret Pillar. The reason why the large sects had so many merit points to buy a Sky Secret Pillar was because of the contributions of many disciples. The matters in the station could not be solved by a single person. It required the concerted efforts of many disciples. For example, as a guardian, Lu Yi had the heavy responsibility of guarding the encampment. Every month, he could receive a portion of the sect's merit points from the Tianji Pillar as his monthly salary. Hua Xiai, as a deputy guardian, also had such benefits. In the future, if a disciple performed well and made a great contribution to the sect, in addition to spirit stones and spirit pills, they could also be directly rewarded with a certain amount of merit points. These merit points all came from the Sky Secret Pillar. These things were the most basic of general knowledge, recorded in the jade slip that Li Baxian had given to Lu Yi. Inside the Tianji Hall, Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed it against the Tianji Pillar. With a thought, he directly converted all 88 blessings into sect merit points. Immediately, the Tianji Pillar was filled with 44,000 sect merit points. He didn't immediately use these merit points to buy more Sky Secret Pillars. Instead, he used his authority as a guardian to give himself and Hua Xiai their monthly salary for this month. Hua Xiai sensed this and looked down to check her battle marks. She was shocked. Why are there so many? Her personal merit points had suddenly increased by 4,400 points, which was 10% of her total merit points. It was the same for Lu Yi. You didn't kill many people in the chess sea. Everyone is short on merit points. Take it first. Who knows when you'll need it? This is too much. I don't need it. You will need it. If it weren't for the fact that the monthly salary couldn't exceed 10%, Lu Yi would have given even more. These merit points had all been earned by him and Hua Xi in the chess sea, so it didn't matter if they were divided equally. However, considering that he still needed to increase the world chi density of the sex station, several thousand merit points was indeed a large number. It was enough for the time being. Chapter 206. Of the 44,000 merit points, after deducting their monthly salaries, there were only 35,200 merit points left. Lu Yi placed his hand on the divine pillar and used his mind to buy blessings with the sex merit points. Cracking sounds could be heard, and something inside the divine pillar seemed to have changed. The situation was the same as last time. While the merit points were reduced by 1,000 points, the concentration of spirit qi in the encampment increased by 10%. When the spirit qi in the encampment was increased by another 10%, the merit points were reduced by 1,500 points. The third time, the merit points were reduced by 2,000 points. Each time it was upgraded, the merit points needed to be spent would increase by 500 points. When there were only 2,700 merit points left, Lu Yi stopped. He couldn't afford it anymore. The next upgrade would cost him 6,000 merit points. Cracking sounds could be heard inside the divine pillar, and the entire interior of the divine pillar underwent a huge change. At the same time, the wind and clouds above the encampment suddenly changed, and a spirit chi vortex visible to the naked eye formed. Under the vortex's guidance, a huge amount of spirit chi poured into the encampment. The nominal disciples and rogue cultivators who were exploring the encampment looked at this scene in amazement, but when they felt the spirit chi in the surroundings increase at an extremely fast speed, they immediately understood what was happening. For a moment, they were all overjoyed. After a full hour, the vortex disappeared. At this time, the concentration of spirit chi in the Jade Blood Sect's encampment had undergone a huge change. Including the blessings that Lu Yi had bought a month ago, there were now 11 blessings on the divine pillar in the Jade Blood Sect's encampment. The spirit chi in the encampment was 20% higher than in the wild. This kind of blessings was extremely terrifying. It could be said that cultivating in this environment was more than twice as efficient as cultivating in the wild. Lu Yi only recently learned about the heavy losses a sect's encampment would suffer after it was captured. He used to think that even if the encampment was captured, as long as the territory was still there, the losses would not be too great. At most, some facilities would be destroyed, and some disciples might be killed. But now, he understood that once the encampment was captured, all the blessings on the divine pillar would be taken away. In this way, it was possible that the accumulation of a generation or even several generations would be completely gone. It was definitely an unbearable pain. He finally understood why Dong Shu Yi betrayed a 9-star sect. The sect's encampment had been occupied by profound sect, and the support of the Heaven's Fate Pillar had been taken away. How could Dong Shu Yi, a mere 7th-order cultivator, bear such a crime? If he didn't betray Jiuxing sect, only death awaited him. Every Spirit Creek garrison battle was a carnival for the sects of the 9 regions. In such a grand event, those sects that lacked merit points could plunder the blessings of the other sects if they were lucky enough. Taking the Blue Blood sect as an example, at this stage, tens of thousands of merit points were simply an unimaginable number. If not for Lu Yi and Hua Xi's huge gains in the Battle of Spirit Creek, it would have been impossible to bring about such an increase in the amount of world energy in the encampment. If they had only relied on the contributions of their disciples, who knew how many years it would have taken to achieve such an effect. But this time, the Spirit Creek garrison battle had more than doubled the amount of world energy in the encampment, and Lu Yi and Hua Xi had made a fortune. For any sect, the Spirit Creek garrison battle was a great opportunity for them to take on the big picture. Of course, they would also have to be prepared to take on the consequences. A bonus of 500 merit points was nothing, but the death of the garrison envoy and deputy garrison envoy would be the true loss. Even so, this did not dampen the enthusiasm of the 9 regions sects to participate in this grand event. However, such a good thing did not happen often. The Spirit Creek garrison battle only happened once every 3 years, and Lu Yi estimated that after 3 years, he would no longer be at the Spirit Creek battlefield. That's right. Lu Yi suddenly remembered something and took out the breath fruit core from his storage bag. Do you want to try this thing? What's the use of this breath fruit core? It can only be said to be helpful to your cultivation. You'll know once you try it. Lu Yi tossed the breath fruit core over. Hua Xi caught it and poured her spirit energy into it. A malicious smile immediately appeared on Lu Ye's face. A moment later, Hua Xi suddenly opened her eyes and groaned as she gasped for breath. Her forehead was covered in a fine layer of sweat, as if she had encountered something terrible. She lowered her head to look at her abdomen, and after confirming that it was intact, she let out a long sigh of relief. You weren't scared, were you? Lu Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry. He and Shui Yuan had both tried the breath fruit core before, but they had not had such a big reaction. Hua Xi looked up at him, her eyes full of resentment. After a long time, she said, "Give me back 50 merit points. You're already a rich woman, so why do you care about 50 merit points?" Hua Xi glared at Lu Yi and threw the breath fruit core back to him. It was a good thing, but it was not suitable for her to use. She then walked out. When she reached the entrance of the heavenly secret hall, she suddenly looked back and smiled. You better not get injured in the future. Lu Ye's face darkened. That's boring. After Hua Xi left, Lu Yi put away the breath fruit core and lowered his head to check his battlefield imprint. Name, Lu Yi. Identity, disciple of the Jade Blood Sect. Cultivation, 86 apertures. Location, Spirit Stream. Battlefield. Merit points, 5,352. The number of merit points on the screen was shocking. There were more than 5,000 merit points. Just the Earth Core Fire alone was enough to buy more than 20 sets. Of course, this was also related to the 4,400 merit points that he had previously given himself. But even without that monthly salary, he still had nearly 1,000 merit points. And all of this was earned by killing in the chess sea. With his 6th order cultivation, participating in the Battle of Spirit Stream battlefield was too advantageous for him. He could casually kill a 7th order cultivator and earn 14 merit points. Sure enough, a horse would not get fat if it did not feed at night. He would have to participate in more of such good things in the future. The change in his cultivation was not big. Compared to before he participated in the Battle of Spirit Stream battlefield, he had only opened 2 more apertures. The main reason was that in that environment, it was difficult to maintain a perfect state of spirit energy. Without a perfect state, there was no way to cultivate. All of the spirit energy he had devoured was used to recover. But it did not matter. Now that the world energy was twice as rich as before, his cultivation efficiency would definitely be greatly improved. Now that Lu Yi was rich, he did not have to worry about merit points in the short term. He had enough cultivation resources. He entered the Tianji treasure house and bought 10 earth core fires, spending 2,000 merit points. It was not that he could not buy more, but now that he had the breath fruit core, he had another way to spend his merit points. There was no harm in keeping some as backup. Lu Yi excitedly walked towards his personal training room with 10 portions of earth core fire in hand. On the way, he met many people, who all stopped to salute him. There was someone called 5th Senior Brother. He was a disciple of the sect. Although Li Baxian was a disciple of the Pill Heart sect, he would always have a place in the Blue Blood sect. He was ranked 4th, so Lu Yi was naturally ranked 5th. The 6th was Hua Xi, the 7th was Kong Niu, the 8th was Yi, and the 9th was Ruan Yu. There was also someone called Envoy Lu. He was a rogue cultivator under the sect. The sect was obviously more lively than before. Not even half a person could be seen. After entering his personal cultivation room, Lu Yi sat cross-legged and took out the earth core fires, allowing the talent tree to devour them. With the disappearance of the earth core fires, the leaves on the talent tree began to burn. On average, each earth core fire could ignite one leaf. By the time all the earth core fires disappeared, there were as many as 14 leaves burning on the talent tree. Lu Yi had never ignited so many leaves at once. So far, he had only obtained 4 spirit tattoos from the talent tree. Looking at the burning leaves, Lu Ye's heart was burning. The things on these leaves were all extremely precious treasures. Taking a deep breath, Lu Yi resolutely looked at the 5th leaf. Unexpectedly, he did not feel too uncomfortable this time. Not long after, Lu Yi opened his eyes with a strange expression. The situation was a little different from what he had imagined. Although the 5th leaf also contained a spirit tattoo, it was different from the previous 4. Whether it was the sharpness, defense, or spirit-gathering bloodstain, they all had a very obvious focus. They were either offensive, defensive, or auxiliary. However, the 5th spirit tattoo was an extremely special spirit tattoo. It could not be used by itself. In other words, even if Lu Yi constructed it, it would not be of any use. It was a spirit tattoo with a linking property. Simply put, it could link different spirit tattoos together and let these different spirit tattoos work at the same time. Rather than calling it a spirit tattoo, it was better to call it a technique. Lu Yi had seen this technique before. There were 9 spiritual inscriptions on the Pan Mountain saber. 7 of them were used to strengthen the saber, while the other 2 were used to increase its lethality. These 9 spiritual inscriptions were connected with each other through a special technique, allowing all the spiritual inscriptions to become a single entity that could perform their own functions. In the past, he was very interested in this ingenious technique, but he never had the time to study it. Moreover, with his attainments in the Tao of spirit tattoos, even if he studied it, he would not be able to find anything. Only now did he know that in addition to the spirit tattoos that could perform various functions, there was also something that could link different spirit tattoos. After recovering for a moment, Lu Yi began to investigate the 6th leaf. It was another connecting spirit pattern, but it was very different from the one on the 5th leaf. From the looks of it, the connecting method between different spirit patterns was also different, requiring different techniques. It was only on the 7th leaf that Lu Yi obtained a spirit tattoo that could work by itself. He continued to examine it one by one. When he was tired, he would resume his cultivation. In any case, he did not need to deliberately cultivate here. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth was constantly flowing into his body under the effect of the spirit-gathering funnel. The spirit pills he swallowed were also ground into spiritual chi under the gluttonous meal. It could be said that as long as he sat here, switched his cultivation method to the gluttonous meal, and then constructed spirit-gathering spirit tattoos in his spiritual apertures, his strength would constantly increase. Of course, he still needed to take the initiative to break through the barriers of his spiritual apertures. Chapter 207. After checking intermittently for 2 days, Lu Yi finished checking all the burning leaves and found a total of 4 new spirit runes. The rest were all connected spirit runes. Sunshine. This was the strangest spirit rune. After it was constructed, it could erupt with intense light. Lu Yi tried it and almost blinded himself. The effect of this spirit rune reminded him of Luo Ji from Boundless Island. This guy had once used a spell called White Scorch. The spell didn't have any power, but it could erupt with intense light. Lu Yi had suffered a loss when he fought with him for the first time. The effect of sunshine was similar to White Scorch, but the light it erupted with was stronger. This spirit rune was useful, but it wasn't very useful. It was useless, but it was still useful. It depended on how it was used. Foundation strengthening. It had the effect of strengthening. Lu Yi compared it with the spirit rune on his Pan Shan saber and found that the spirit rune on the saber was 70% to 80% similar to the foundation strengthening. They should be from the same source. The nature of this spirit rune was similar to the defensive spirit rune, but the effect was different. The defensive spirit rune could construct a layer of protection to fend off external damage. The strengthening spirit rune could make the object that was being reinforced even more sturdy. Lu Yi tried it on himself, and in the end, the flesh and blood in the area that was being reinforced started to squirm, becoming even more sturdy. However, the after effects were also very obvious. After the spirit rune dissipated, the flesh and blood that had undergone the changes all felt sore. Lu Yi felt that this thing wasn't strengthened on his body, but on his spirit weapon. Wind walk. When strengthened, the body would become lighter and run faster. One of the spirit runes was the Wind Walk spirit rune. When Lu Yi was first chased by Dong Shai, he used 2 Wind Walk spirit runes. After tasting the sweetness, he always kept a few Wind Walk spirit runes in his storage bag. When facing some powerful enemies, if he couldn't win, he could only run. With the Wind Walk spirit rune, he could run faster. However, spirit runes were external objects. With the Wind Walk spirit rune, those spirit runes could be disposed of. It could be said that this spirit rune was the most valuable spirit rune Lu Yi had obtained this time. Heavy pressure. This spirit pattern would produce an invisible force field that would make everything in the force field heavy. Lu Yi also tried it. In this heavy pressure field, he felt as if he was carrying a few hundred kilograms of weight on his back. Although with his cultivation level, a few hundred kilograms of weight was nothing to him, if he suddenly had such a burden on the enemy during a battle, it would definitely disrupt the enemy's battle rhythm. By the time the enemy adjusted, the weight would disappear, and it would cause a second disruption. Sunshine, consolidation, wind travel, heavy pressure. Including the previous sharpness, defense, spirit gathering, and bloodstain, Lu Yi had mastered as many as 8 spirit inscriptions. Just like before, the newly mastered spiritual tattoos would not directly increase his strength and cultivation realm, but if he could use these spiritual tattoos at the right time, his combat effectiveness would be greatly improved. Lu Yi gradually realized the horror of a spiritual tattooist. Different from other schools, a spiritual tattooist could activate one spiritual tattoo after another in a battle, which led to the extremely unpredictable fighting style of a spiritual tattooist. Once a spiritual tattooist could not keep up with the fighting rhythm of a spiritual tattooist, he would die a slow death. Now he had mastered 8 spiritual tattoos, but he could already simulate the fighting style of various combinations of spiritual tattoos in his mind. What if he had mastered 18, 28, or even 80 spiritual tattoos? A spiritual tattooist was really terrifying. All his spiritual tattoos came from the talent tree, which gave him the capital to construct spiritual tattoos at will, which led to a problem. He knew the 8 spiritual tattoos he had mastered and even those connected spiritual tattoos, but he didn't know the reason why. He could activate them and knew what effect they would have, but he didn't know anything else. It was time to visit Madame Yun. Last time when Lu Yi went to Madame Yun's place, Madame Yun asked Lu Yi to visit her place often when he was free. It should be that she thought highly of Lu Ye's potential to become a spiritual tattooist. However, Lu Yi had to participate in the Battle of Spirit Stream and was anxious to improve his cultivation, so he had no time to visit her. After he came back, he had to reorganize the station, so he had no time. At that time, Lu Yi didn't know Madame Yun's identity and only thought that her relationship with the headmaster was unclear. After that, he asked senior sister Xueyuan and learned about a rather complicated emotional entanglement. In short, the headmaster owed Madame Yun, and Madame Yun didn't like the headmaster because of this. However, the two had a deep relationship in their early years, so it was impossible for them to break up with each other. Therefore, Madame Yun lived in a spiritual peak of the Jade Blood sect. She didn't have any contact with the headmaster and lived alone. Xueyuan often went to Madame Yun's place to talk with her. To put it simply, the two of them were in the stage of separation where their relationship was slightly broken, but they couldn't bear to let go. However, the period of separation was a little long and was calculated in years. According to Xueyuan, they had been in this state for dozens of years. However, Xueyuan held Madame Yun in high esteem because Madame Yun was a very outstanding spirit tattooist. If all the powerful spirit tattooists in the 9 prefectures were ranked, Madame Yun should be able to occupy the top 20 position. In the past few decades, Madame Yun lived in seclusion. Except for the older generation who were familiar with Madame Yun, the whole 9 regions almost forgot such a woman who used to be amazing. If Lu Yi wanted to learn the way of spiritual tattoos, it was undoubtedly the best place to visit Madame Yun. After leaving the practice room, he returned to the sect through the Tianji Hall and found Senior Sister Shueyuan who was studying new recipes. Are you going to visit Madame Yun? Yes, I want to learn something about spiritual tattoos from Madame Yun. That's right. You have the inheritance of a spiritual tattooist, and Madame Yun is a master in the way of spiritual tattoos. She is the best person to teach you. Then why are you looking for me? Do you want me to send you there? That's not necessary. It's not far away. I can go by myself. However, since it's a visit, I can't go empty-handed. I think I should bring something. Shueyuan pursed her lips and chuckled. If you want to bring something, go to the Moon Lake and catch a few blood-red trout. Madame Yun likes to eat them, but she can't catch them in person because of her face. I bring them to her every time. Also, don't mention sect master in front of Madame Yun. Otherwise, the consequences will be very serious. At its peak, the Jade Blood sect had dozens of spirit peaks and occupied an extremely vast area. However, because of the decline of talents in recent decades, even the sect's protective array was gradually removed. Therefore, although the dozens of spirit peaks were still considered the property of the Jade Blood sect, the Jade Blood sect did not take care of them anymore. The buildings of the past still remained on those spirit peaks. From the dilapidated buildings, one could vaguely see the sect's former glory. Now, the only places in the Jade Blood sect that still had people were the Guardian Peak in the center and the Bright Heart Peak where Madame Yun lived. The Moon Lake was located between the Guardian Peak and the Green Bamboo Peak. After receiving second senior sister's guidance, Lu Yi was about to rush to the Moon Lake when Hupo ran over. He nudged Lu Yi with his big head and whimpered. A tiger's life was lonely. Recently, Lu Yi had been very busy. Yi was also very busy. However, Yi did not appear at the station often. She stayed in the sect more often because she was learning spells from sect master. As a result, Hupo was often lonely. Now that he was considered Lu Ye's pet beast and they had gone through thick and thin together for so long, he was naturally very close to Lu Yi. When he heard Lu Yi and Shui Yuan's conversation, he knew it was time for him to make his appearance. As the saying goes, an army is trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. As a pet beast, Hupo was very self-aware. Lu Yi didn't know if it was because she had a pet contract with Hupo, but she could now vaguely see through its thoughts. Although it wasn't as bizarre as Yi's ability to understand what it was saying, it was pretty close. Then let's go together. Lu Yi patted Hupo's big head and leaped onto his back. Hupo immediately perked up and carried Lu Yi to the Moon Lake. Not long after, a crescent-shaped lake came into view. Lu Yi had been here before. Back when Li Baxian was still in the Jade Blood sect, he would occasionally bring Lu Yi here to fish. Lu Yi was speechless. If he wanted to eat fish, he could just go down and catch it. What was the point of fishing? Li Baxian, on the other hand, thought it was fun to do so. Since Li Baxian wasn't around, Lu Yi naturally wouldn't waste any time. He took off his clothes and dove into the lake, catching several fat blood-red trout in no time. After getting ashore, he put on his clothes and rode Hupo all the way to Bright Heart Peak. When he reached the peak, he leaped off the tiger's back and stood in front of Madame Yun's residence. Lu Yi bowed respectfully. Disciple Lu Yi has come to visit. Come in. Madame Yun's voice immediately came from inside. Lu Yi gave Hupo a look, telling him to wait for him here. He then fed Hupo a few spirit pills. Only then did he carry a few blood-red trout and enter. Inside the same hall as last time, Madame Yun stood there quietly. Lu Yi bowed. Greetings, Madame Yun. Madame Yun looked at the gift in his hand and smiled. Did that girl Shui Yuan tell you to bring these? Second senior sister said that Madame likes to eat this kind of fish, so this disciple casually caught a few. How thoughtful of you. Madame Yun waved her hand, and a young girl who looked like a servant girl walked forward. She smiled at Lu Yi and took the blood-red trout from his hand. Lu Yi nodded in acknowledgement, feeling a little curious. He didn't see this servant girl the last time he came. From the looks of it, Madame Yun didn't live alone and had someone to serve her. However, this servant girl gave off a strange feeling, but Lu Yi couldn't pinpoint exactly what was strange about her. Have a seat. Madame Yun greeted Lu Yi when she sat down. I wouldn't dare. This disciple will just stand. Madame Yun didn't force him and asked, why are you here this time? This disciple would like to learn the way of spirit runes from Madame. Sure, as long as it wasn't that old fart who asked you to come. Madame Yun agreed readily. The old fart she was referring to was definitely the sect master. Lu Yi pretended not to hear and didn't dare to make a sound. You told me last time that you know how to construct those spirit runes, but other than those 4 spirit runes, you know nothing about other knowledge? Yes. Madame Yun understood. It seems that the inheritance you received is indeed incomplete, or perhaps it's the kind of enlightenment. Chapter 208. Previously, Madame Yun had said that the inheritance that Lu Yi obtained might be incomplete. Lu Yi didn't know whether it was incomplete or not. He only knew that the talent tree should be the inheritance of a spirit rune master. However, unlike what others thought, he didn't obtain it in the spirit stream battlefield. Instead, he obtained it when he came to this world. Of course, there was no need to spread this around. What do you want to learn from me? Madame Yun asked. If possible, I would like to learn from the basics. Madame Yun nodded. That's the right choice. Follow me. After saying that, she stepped forward with Lu Yi following behind her. Not long after, they arrived at a room. Madame Yun pushed the door open and entered. This room was different from the room where he had inscriptions last time. This room was very big, and there were grooves on the 4 walls. The grooves were filled with books of varying thickness. There were at least 1,000 books in this room. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this was a small library. Not only that, but the spirit runes visible to the naked eye were swimming on the walls like fish. It was obvious that there was an extremely profound formation set up here. Madame Yun casually waved her hand, and a book about a finger thick flew into her hand. She handed the book to Lu Yi. Finish reading this book first. Lu Yi took it respectfully, thinking that he still had to self-study first. After Madame Yun left, Lu Yi looked around. There were no tables or chairs here. He took out a futon from his storage bag and threw it down. He sat cross-legged on it and lowered his head to look at the book in his hand. There were no words on the cover. When he opened the first page, a line of large words appeared before his eyes. Basic Theory of Spirit Runes. There was a signature at the side, Mu Xiaoyao. It seemed that this book was written by a guy named Mu Xiaoyao. Lu Yi flipped to the next page and focused on it. Chaos is divided into yin and yang. Yin and yang turn into all things. All things in the world have yin and yang. The path of spirit runes uses yin and yang as the foundation, and endless combinations and constructions give rise to endless wonders. Time passed. Lu Yi read word by word and soon immersed himself in it. There were no special spiritual tattoos recorded in this book. Mu Xiaoyao explained the basics of spiritual tattoos in a simple way, which was especially suitable for beginners like Lu Yi. Ordinary beginners might not be able to understand some of the essence of the words. Although Lu Yi was a beginner, he had mastered some spiritual tattoos. With the help of his own spiritual tattoos, he had a more thorough understanding of the things described in this book. Unknowingly, Lu Yi reached the last page. He sat in place, holding the book in one hand and propping up his chin with the other. He fell into deep thought. Have you finished reading? Madame Yun's voice suddenly sounded beside her ear. Lu Yi was startled. Just as he was about to get up, Madame Yun pressed down with her hand, indicating that it was fine for him to sit. She then sat down in front of Lu Yi. What are your thoughts? Madame Yun asked. The way of spiritual tattoos is so broad and profound that it is beyond my imagination. This was the truth. Before reading this book, he knew that spirit runes were complicated and profound, but he didn't expect them to be so complicated and profound. Madame Yun smiled. That's why there are so few spiritual tattooists. If you want to go down this path, you need more than perseverance and determination. You also need talent, very high talent. Fortunately, you have received the inheritance of spiritual tattooists, so your talent is not a problem. I will work harder. After Lu Yi finished speaking, he asked for guidance again. According to the book, the two main elements that make up spirit tattoos are the two basic elements of yin and yang. All spirit tattoos can be disassembled into different amounts of yin and yang. Are there no exceptions? Madame Yun shook her head. There is no exception. At least I haven't seen an exception. Lu Yi couldn't help admiring her. The person who can discover the yin and yang is really amazing. According to the book, chaos gave birth to yin and yang transformed into all things. Therefore, all people or things in the world belong to yin and yang, and spiritual tattoos were the culmination of the convergence of yin and yang. There were two kinds of foundations to construct spirit marks. One was yin essence, and the other was yang essence. Among them, yin essence was a very simple pattern that looked like the word self had been flattened. Although yang essence was also the same pattern, it was the opposite of yin essence. Yin and yang were arranged and combined in different ways, but they formed spiritual tattoos with different natures. If any of them went wrong, the spiritual tattoos couldn't be formed, let alone play a role. According to Lu Ye's understanding, the process of constructing spiritual tattoos with yin and yang was like building a house with different shapes with two different types of building blocks. How to build the house stably and play its role was what a spiritual tattooist needed to do. This was not a simple thing. It should be known that each spiritual tattoo contained at least hundreds of basic elements, and the number of combinations that could be formed by these hundreds of basic elements was almost unimaginable. This was also the reason why Lu Yi said that the way of spiritual tattoos was extensive and profound. At this moment, when he recalled the spiritual tattoos that he had constructed, he found that each spiritual tattoo was formed by the arrangement of yin and yang. He didn't pay attention to this point before and only felt that the internal structure of these spiritual tattoos was similar at first glance. But now he knew that the internal structure of each spiritual tattoo was very different. This was the saying that the layman watched the fun, while the expert watched the skill. Those who didn't understand spiritual tattoos couldn't see the difference in the internal structure of different spiritual tattoos. The people who discovered the yin and yang dual elements are really amazing, but those spiritual tattooists who created different spiritual tattoos are even more amazing. Every practical spiritual tattoo may be the result of the tireless pursuit of one or several generations of people. Before creating these spiritual tattoos, they may have failed millions of times, tens of millions of times or even more. Lu Yi nodded in agreement. This number was not exaggerated. But it is because of the efforts of our ancestors that we, the descendants, have so many spiritual tattoos to use now. Madame Yun looked at Lu Yi and said, the real outstanding spiritual tattooists can innovate instead of relying on the foundation left by their ancestors. If everyone does this, the way of spiritual tattoos will decline sooner or later. I hope that one day you can make your own contribution to the way of spiritual tattoos. I will try my best. Madame Yun nodded and said, you know the foundation of spiritual tattoos, so you can start to practice now. As she spoke, she slowly raised her right index finger, and a glimmer of light flickered on her fingertip. What can you see? Lu Yi looked at it with full eyesight. After a while, he hesitated and said, Yin Yuan. What about now? A Yang Yuan. Your eyesight is not bad. A spiritual tattooist should have excellent eyesight and have extremely precise control of his spiritual force. If you can't do this, you can't become a spiritual tattooist. Let me see your ability. Construct Yin Yuan and Yang Yuan as I did just now. Yes. Lu Yi sat upright, raised a finger, and tried to construct a Yin Yuan on his finger by activating his spiritual force. He saw Madame Yun doing it as if it were a piece of cake, but after he really got started, he realized that it wasn't that simple. Fortunately, he had many experiences in constructing spirit tattoos. Even if he didn't know much about spirit tattoos in the past, experience was experience. After spending half an hour, a Yin Yuan constructed by spiritual force appeared on his finger. Lu Yi frowned because this Yin Yuan was too big. The Yin Yuan constructed by Madame Yun was almost invisible. He had to use full eyesight to barely see it. However, the Yin Yuan constructed by Lu Yi was the size of a fingernail and couldn't be maintained stably. As his spiritual force surged, the Yin Yuan suddenly collapsed and lasted less than 2 breaths. Such a large Yin Yuan couldn't be used to construct spiritual tattoos. A spiritual tattoo contained hundreds of basic elements. When hundreds of such large elements were arranged together, the spiritual tattoo formed would definitely be incomparably huge. Cultivators couldn't bear such consumption in battle, not to mention that it wasn't stable enough. Madame Yun smiled and said, "Very good. When I first practiced, it took me 2 days to reach your level. It seems that the spiritual tattooist's inheritance is still very useful. Moreover, your spiritual force is pure enough, making it easier to control. This is your advantage. Try to construct another Yang Yuan." Lu Yi responded and tried to construct the Yang Yuan. With his previous experience, it was much easier this time. However, he still couldn't solve the shortcomings of being too big and not stable enough. Madame Yun was full of praise. "You're making fast progress. Now that you've learned how to construct Yin and Yang Yuan, all that's left is practice. When you can easily convert Yin and Yang Yuan and make them stable enough, you can shrink them to the size of a grain of rice. Then, you can proceed to the next step." As she said this, she waved her hand again, and more than 10 books flew over from all directions. She handed these books of varying thickness to Lu Yi. "Take them back and read them. These are all books that explain the basics of spiritual tattoos. Come find me when you've reached my requirements." Lu Yi stood up and said respectfully, "Yes, disciple will definitely practice diligently after returning." After a short while, Lu Yi walked out of Madame Yun's residence. He turned around and bowed again. Hu Pe, who had been waiting outside, ran over. Lu Yi flipped onto the tiger's back and headed towards Shojin Peak. Madame Yun was really a good teacher with a gentle personality. How could the headmaster bear to let her live alone in Brightheart Peak? Even if she made a mistake, she could just go and admit it. And, the headmaster's backbone was also straight. After returning to Shojin Peak and greeting senior sister Shui Yuan, Lu Yi entered the encampment. The encampment wasn't as lively as he imagined, mainly because the cultivation environment had suddenly become so good. Regardless of whether it was the new disciples of the main sect or those loose cultivators, they were all working hard to cultivate. As a cultivator, one's own strength was the foundation. Without this kind of awareness, one wouldn't be able to go far on the path of cultivation. Lu Yi first found a junior martial brother who had stayed behind to guard the Tianji Hall. From him, he learned that there had been no problems in the encampment recently, so he headed towards the cultivation room. Now, the cultivation room was overcrowded. Even if there were several hundred rooms here, it still wasn't enough for everyone. There were also people waiting in line outside. They could cultivate outside, but without the support of the spiritual gathering formation in the cultivation room, the efficiency would be lower. However, this situation would slowly improve because the cultivation resources in everyone's hands were limited. Once the previous monthly salary was used up, the pressure on the cultivation room would be alleviated. Chapter 209. Lu Yi didn't go to his personal training room. Instead, he walked to one of the training rooms and used his authority as a guardian to open the door. A young girl who was cultivating inside was startled. "Fifth senior brother, did I do something wrong?" Then, as if remembering something, she squatted down and covered her head with both hands. "I won't harass sixth senior sister anymore. I'm not trying to steal your woman, please don't hit me." Did I just hear something terrible? A moment later, Lu Yi left a spirit-gathering spirit rune that covered the entire wall of this cultivation room before turning around and walking out, leaving behind the young girl whose eyes had lost focus. With so many cultivation rooms, Lu Yi couldn't arrange spirit-gathering spirit runes in all of them at once, so he could only arrange them when he had time. His initial goal was to arrange a spirit-gathering spirit rune in each cultivation room, then slowly add 2, 3, and so on. After arranging several cultivation rooms, Lu Yi entered his exclusive cultivation room and used the little remaining spirit chi in his body to construct a small funnel in his spirit aperture before switching to his gluttonous meal secret art and tossing 2 profound spirit pills into his mouth. While cultivating, Yang Kai studied the books Madame Yun had brought him, and from time to time, he would construct yin and yang qi on his fingers to strengthen his practice. His consumed spirit chi was quickly restored, and after the world energy density in the station increased, both his recovery and cultivation efficiency more than doubled. Lu Yi felt that if he cultivated wholeheartedly, he could break through to the 7th order in less than 20 days. However, improving his cultivation too quickly wasn't necessarily a good thing. Li Baxian had also warned him before that he needed to pay attention to his foundation. While improving his cultivation, he also needed to improve himself in all aspects. Otherwise, if he only improved his realm but didn't have the corresponding strength, it would be impossible. Lu Yi wasn't too worried about his foundation being insufficient, but now that he had to study the spirit rune Dao and construct yin and yang qi, he needed to consume spirit qi and occasionally go to other cultivation rooms to arrange spirit-gathering spirit runes, which delayed his cultivation speed. Reading one book after another, Lu Yi frantically absorbed the knowledge in these books, making it easier to construct yin and yang qi, but there was still a gap between him and Madame Yun's requirements. A day later, a somewhat tired Lu Yi put down the book in his hand and stretched. Although studying the spirit rune Dao was interesting, it became boring after a long time. Lu Yi thought about it and took out the breath fruit core from his storage bag. Just as he was about to circulate his spirit chi, he quickly took out the mountain coiling saber. He wanted to see if he could bring the mountain pan saber into the mirage realm. Last time, he didn't bring the saber, and his 50 merit points were basically wasted. With his previous experience, Lu Yi walked up to the only door and pushed it open. Just like last time, a line of wriggling words appeared on the door, saying that it would cost 50 merit points to enter the mirage realm. Lu Yi was now so rich that he didn't even bat an eyelid as he pushed the door open. His imprint heated up slightly, and 50 merit points were deducted. Lu Yi looked back, but couldn't see any traces of a door. The small space they were in seemed to be just a transit point. A strange sound came from the fog in front of him, and he could vaguely hear something crawling. Lu Yi immediately squatted down and pressed his hand on the mountain coiling saber's hilt. The fog in front of him surged as if something was about to break out of the fog. Here it comes. Lu Yi secretly circulated his spirit chi, and in the next moment, a strange-looking thing jumped out of the fog and pounced at him. The thing that came at him looked like a praying mantis. It crawled with 4 legs and was extremely fast. Its front 2 blade-like legs flickered with a cold light. This praying mantis was not inferior to Lu Yi in size. It was green with a hint of black. The wings on its back gave it the ability to glide in the air. Lu Yi had never seen such a big praying mantis. The last time he came here, he was frightened by it. He didn't have a weapon, so he couldn't last long here. As the praying mantis leapt over, its mandibles were constantly opening and closing. Its serrated teeth were sharp, and if one was bitten by this thing, it would definitely not end well. The distance between them quickly closed, and the two mantis blades slashed towards Lu Ye's left and right, as if trying to cut off his head. Such a blow was not inferior to the full strength of a sixth-order weapon cultivator. Lu Yi faintly felt that this was related to his own strength. After all, he was a sixth-order weapon cultivator. When the mantis blades slashed out, Lu Yi had already lowered his body and slid out from under the praying mantis, the mountain coiling saber in his hands slashing out. Dark green insect blood splattered everywhere along with its innards. With a plop, the menacing praying mantis fell behind Lu Yi, its entire body nearly cleaved in half by a single slash. This was the killing power of Lu Ye's sharpness saber. Under the same realm, anyone who was hit by this attack would die without a doubt. However, before he could stabilize himself, there was movement from both sides of the fog, and two more praying mantises rushed out from the fog, almost simultaneously rushing towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi wanted to test the power of his new spirit inscriptions, so his legs suddenly flashed with light as he activated Wind Walk, increasing his speed sharply. In an instant, he had arrived in front of one of the praying mantis, raised his saber, and slashed down. This strike missed the praying mantis blade and shattered its head. The second praying mantis had already arrived, so Lu Yi immediately turned around and slashed out with his saber, only to be blocked by the praying mantis blade. The heavy pressure spirit inscriptions were silently added to the mountain coiling saber, and the praying mantis, which was already at a disadvantage in terms of strength, suddenly staggered under the pressure. Lu Yi took advantage of this opportunity and stabbed his saber, most of the blade piercing into the praying mantis' mouth. When he pulled his saber out, the praying mantis wriggled on the ground, hissing sounds coming from its mouth. Lu Yi gasped for breath as another movement came from the fog. Soon, 3 praying mantises rushed out from 3 different directions. The battle had not stopped since the beginning, and the number of praying mantises that Lu Yi had to deal with also increased from 1 praying mantis to 1 praying mantis each time. Everything here was extremely real. When Lu Yi killed those praying mantises, he could smell the pungent smell of their blood. When the blood spilled on his body, it also felt very real. Even when he was injured, there would be dark red blood flowing out. Lu Yi did not know what kind of place the Mirage Realm connected to by his breath fruit core was, but everything here was no different from the outside world. The only difference was that after he died in battle here, he would not really die, and the corpses of the praying mantises he killed would disappear in a very short period of time. This seemed to be a place specially for cultivators to hone their combat skills. He had let Shui Yuan try it out at that time, and she had also said that it was something. To be able to hone one's combat skills in such an environment was simply a dream for Lu Yi. His cultivation level had increased too quickly, and his cultivation time was too short. This led to him not having much experience in fighting with other cultivators. Even if he had killed his way through before, it still could not make up for this shortcoming. With the Mirage Realm, it was different. Although the opponents here were praying mantises and not cultivators, the feeling of walking on the edge of life and death was the same, and the pain of being injured was the same. In such a place, Lu Yi could use all he had learned to his heart's content and find his own shortcomings in the fierce battle. The number of praying mantises gradually increased to 9, and Lu Yi felt that he was about to reach his limit. In such a small area, even if he played different tricks with his own spirit patterns, he would inevitably be beaten up by the group. The sharp praying mantis blades left deep wounds on his body, and even his abdomen was cut open, and his internal organs flowed out. In the end, after Lu Yi killed 3 of the 9 praying mantises, his head was pierced by a praying mantis blade. The feeling of death at that moment was extremely real. In the exclusive practice room, Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes and gasped for breath. Even though he had the previous experience and knew that he wouldn't really die if he died in the Mirage, he still had a very strong feeling of palpitations. At the same time, his mind was extremely painful, as if there was a needle in it. This was also the reason why Hua Xi looked at him with such a bitter expression after he tried the core of the breath fruit for her. The feeling of death was too terrible, and no one wanted to experience it. He checked himself, and the injuries in the Mirage Realm did not appear, but his spiritual power was greatly consumed. It seemed that everything else in the Mirage realm was fake, and only the consumption of spiritual power and the accumulated exhaustion were real. At the same time, after death, his mind would hurt, which might be the reason for the mental exhaustion. Therefore, every time he entered the Mirage realm, it was impossible to enter a second time in a short time, and he had to rest for a day. Breath fruit cores had all kinds of strange uses and were not fixed. Even though the breath fruit core that Lu Yi obtained didn't connect to any rich spiritual veins and couldn't increase the efficiency of cultivation, it could improve one's combat skills through the feeling of death again and again, but no benefits could be exchanged for it. Fourth's senior brother really had a good eye. At that time, there were 9 fruits on the breath fruit tree, and he chose this one. He continued to cultivate and restore his spiritual power, and took out food from the storage bag to replenish his physical strength. As the days passed, Lu Yi, in addition to occasionally returning to the sect to enjoy the delicious food made by senior sister Xueyuan, had been staying in the practice room, studying the books brought back from Madame Yun, constructing the yin and yang dual elements, and entering the Mirage realm every day to chop the mantis, living a fulfilling life. After gradually familiarizing himself with the fighting methods of those praying mantises, Lu Yi also made rapid progress. He could kill those big guys in the shortest time with the least consumption. At the same time, in this fierce battle, he could gradually use his new spiritual tattoos freely. It was not until 5 days later that Lu Yi walked out of the practice room. As usual, he asked the junior brother on duty in the Tianji Hall. After confirming that the station was fine, he returned to the sect. He found Hupa and rode it straight to the Bright Heart Peak. The more than a dozen books had been read, and the construction and switching of the yin and yang dual elements had also met the requirements of Madame Yun. It was time to move on to the next step. Chapter 210. On Mingxin Peak, in the hidden study, Lu Yi knelt in front of Madame Yun and spread out his palm. Under the slight surge of spiritual power in his palm, a yin primordial qi, which was smaller than a grain of rice, quickly took shape. Then it changed to yang primordial qi and back to yin primordial qi. In just a few breaths, it changed more than a dozen times. Madame Yun was in front of him, checking his results. "It's done," Madame Yun said. Only then did Lu Yi disperse his spiritual power. "I have to say that there is a reason why you can get the inheritance of the spiritual tattooist. You have a high talent in this field." Madame Yun looked at him approvingly. When the headmaster brought Lu Yi here for the first time, Madame Yun just didn't want to waste the predecessor's inheritance in Lu Ye's hands, so she wanted to give him some advice and let him come to Mingxin Peak when he was free. In this way, he might be able to make full use of the inheritance. But after these 2 times, she was surprised to find that although the predecessor had passed away, he still had the vision to choose the inheritance. Lu Yi, a beginner, only spent half an hour last time to do what she did in 2 days. This time, it was even more ridiculous. He reached her requirement of switching between yin and yang primordial qi in 5 days. Back then, she had spent a whole month to reach this level. Comparing the two, she found that Lu Ye's talent in spiritual tattoos was much higher than hers. The young man in front of her was worth her effort to cultivate. For a moment, her gaze at Lu Yi became much softer. Maybe, she could consider snatching this young man from the old thing and making him her successor. She thought that the old thing wouldn't dare to say anything. This matter shouldn't be rushed. She should take it slowly. Putting away the thoughts in her mind, she flipped her hand, and a transparent crystal about the size of an egg appeared in her palm. The crystal was flat, and it was obviously carved like this. There were many hollowed-out areas on the surface of the crystal, and from the hollowed-out marks, it looked like a pattern of the yin and yang elements arranged together. Madame Yun threw the transparent crystal to Lu Yi. Lu Yi took it and looked at it. "Is this a spiritual tattoo?" "This is a spiritual tattoo." Madame Yun nodded. "Anything that can be formed by yin and yang primordial qi is a spiritual tattoo." Lu Yi immediately remembered this sentence. He had read it in a book 2 days ago, which was written by the guy named Mu Xiaoyao. This Mu Xiaoyao must be an amazing spirit rune master. According to Mu Xiaoyao, whether a spiritual inscription could be called a spiritual inscription depended on whether it was stable after it was constructed. The yin and yang elements could not be arranged randomly. Instead, they needed to follow a mysterious principle. If the elements were arranged randomly, there was a 99% chance that they would not be able to form. Even if they were barely able to form, the elements would clash. In serious cases, it could cause spiritual energy to go berserk. Therefore, creating a new spirit rune wasn't an easy task. If one wasn't careful, they might even end up with injuries. However, there are two types of spiritual tattoos. One is useful and the other is useless. There are still useless spirit inscriptions. The spirit pattern on your hand is the one. Madame Yun explained, the so-called useful spirit runes can produce all kinds of miraculous effects. The useless spirit runes can't be used at all. They are simply formed. Try dissecting this spirit pattern and tell me how many foundational elements there are in total. How much yin and yang elements are contained in these foundational elements? Yes. Lu Yi answered. He carefully looked at the transparent crystal in his hand and simulated the construction of this spirit pattern in his mind. For him, this was not an easy task. Because the lines in the spirit pattern looked very similar, and the combination of yin and yang elements was also integrated, some lines looked like two foundational elements, but in fact, they were made up of 3 or even 4 foundational elements. This not only tested his eyesight but also his brain power. However, Madame Yun taught him how to dissect the spirit pattern first, which undoubtedly made it easier for him to master this spirit pattern. Only when he dissected it accurately could he clearly understand the complete structure of the whole spirit pattern. In Lu Ye's memory, there were many famous great people who rose from dissecting their families. After half an hour, after repeated confirmation, Lu Yi raised his head and said, "Madam, there are 30 foundational elements in this spirit pattern, 12 of which are yin elements and 18 of which are yang elements." Madame Yun nodded with a smile. Yes, this is the simplest spirit pattern in the way of spiritual tattoos. The first step for a spiritual tattooist to teach a disciple to practice spiritual tattoos is to construct 30 of this spirit pattern. 30 of spirit patterns? Useless spirit patterns are only named with numbers. I see. The ancestor who created 30 of spirit patterns must be a genius. The more foundational elements, the better the spiritual tattoos were. With more foundational elements, there would be more changes. One might be able to construct an extremely powerful spirit pattern, but to create a stable spirit pattern with only 30 foundational elements was a great test of one's own attainment. It was like the dish that tested the chef's ability the most was stir-fried shredded potatoes. Although the Buddha jumps over the wall, which required complicated ingredients and took a long time, was delicious, the chef who made the Buddha jumps over the wall might not be able to cook a plate of shredded potatoes that everyone praised. It's rare for you to think like this. In the following time, Madame Yun asked Lu Yi about the things in the dozens of books he had read before. Lu Yi took the opportunity to ask some questions that he was confused about, and then Madame Yun explained some basic knowledge of the way of spiritual tattoos to him. Time flew. In the hidden study, one was teaching attentively, while the other was learning attentively. Unknowingly, the sky had turned dark. Madame Yun stood up and said, "Let's call it a day. Your cultivation is still low, so you should focus on improving your own cultivation. The way of spiritual tattoos is broad and profound. It's not something that can be learned in a day or two. Go back and study 30 of spirit patterns. When you can successfully construct them, come back to me." As she spoke, she waved her hand again and took out a dozen books, giving them to Lu Yi to take away. A moment later, Lu Yi walked out under the escort of the maidservant. He turned around, thanked her, and said, "May I ask how I should address you?" Every time he came here, he would see this maidservant. Lu Yi didn't know her name, so he wanted to ask for her name since they would have to interact frequently in the future. Unexpectedly, the maidservant just smiled at Lu Yi and didn't answer. Lu Yi looked at her for a while, then cupped his fists and said, "Farewell." Such a good little girl was actually deaf. She was quite pitiful. Riding Hoopa back to Guarding Peak, the sect leader was standing in the square, looking up at the blood-bottomed golden flame flag that symbolized the Jade Blood sect. Sect leader. Lu Yi stepped forward and bowed. The sect leader seemed to have just noticed him and turned around. "You came back from Brightheart Peak?" "Yes. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to go and study the Tao of Spirit runes." The sect leader nodded, looked around, and said in a low voice, "Has Madame Yun ever mentioned this old master in front of you?" Lu Yi suddenly felt conflicted, not knowing how to answer. In the end, he honestly said, "Never." The sect leader's expression was clearly a bit disappointed. After exchanging a few more words with the sect leader, Lu Yi left. After entering the station, Lu Yi hid in the cultivation practice room. As usual, he first constructed small funnels in his spirit cavities, switched between cultivation methods, and swallowed spirit pills. Only then did he begin to construct Spirit Rune 30. The Spirit Rune surged on his palm, turning into the first Yin essence, which then merged with the first Yang essence. Constructing a Spirit Rune required a smooth process that couldn't be interrupted, otherwise it would inevitably fail. At the same time, it required extremely precise control of one's spirit chi, otherwise it would be impossible to succeed. Although Lu Yi could freely switch between Yin essence and Yang essence before, that was only a single foundation essence. Now that he began to construct Spirit Rune 30, he immediately felt the difficulty. This was different from the spirit runes he had constructed in the past. When he constructed the spirit runes he had obtained from the talent tree, the spirit runes were instantly formed with just a thought. This was because all the mysteries of the spirit runes had been imprinted into his mind through the tree leaves. This was also the reason why he could quickly complete the task assigned by Madame Yun. He had an advantage that other spirit rune masters didn't have, and that was that he had successfully constructed many spirit runes. In the Tao of Spirit runes, he had an extremely special foundation. In his first attempt, he only constructed 3 foundation essences before failing because his spirit chi wasn't stable enough. Then came the second attempt. The third attempt, half an hour later, Lu Yi exploded. Even though he repeatedly comforted himself to be calm and not to be impatient, he still couldn't help but have an impulse to beat someone after failing again and again. After barely holding on for another hour, his mentality completely collapsed. Taking a deep breath, he took out 2 things from his storage bag. One was the breath fruit core, the other was the mountain pan blade. "Stinky bugs, Daddy is coming to see you." He spent 50 merit points to enter the Mirage realm and start a massacre. In the past few days, Lu Yi came in almost every day to temper his fighting skills in the bloody battles. Then he found that the monsters in the Mirage realm were not only mantises, but also ants as long as a man, locusts as tall as half a man, spiders, and other strange bugs that he didn't know the names of. Basically, the monsters he encountered were different every time he entered the Mirage realm. Every time he came in contact with these new monsters, he would suffer some losses because the monsters here had their own unique abilities. For example, the ant-like monster's blood was extremely corrosive after death. If he was injured by locusts, the situation would be more troublesome. There would be parasite eggs in the wound, and some small locusts would hatch in a short time. There was also a kind of bug that could spray venom, and a porcupine-like bug with bone spurs all over its body. When the bone spurs were stimulated, they were extremely lethal. As a result, Lu Yi basically died in the siege of 9 monsters every time. The best situation was when he killed 5 monsters, but he was mercilessly killed by the remaining 4. He died a tragic death. This time, he encountered the porcupine-like bug. In the end, when the 9 monsters appeared together, bone spurs filled the sky. Lu Yi couldn't stop them even if he kept activating the defense spiritual tattoo. However, he still killed 6 monsters before he died. He was improving little by little. Lu Yi felt that if he came in 2 more times, he should be able to kill his way through this level. After coming out of the Mirage realm, although his head hurt, his depressed mood was much better. The best way to vent depression was to beat someone up or be beaten up. Chapter 211. In the Mirage Realm, Lu Yi held his mountain coiling saber and was bathed in blood. The last monster was cut down by his saber, and the ground was covered in green blood and severed limbs. After many days, he finally killed 9 monsters that appeared at the same time. Although his injuries were serious to the point of dizziness, he didn't relax his vigilance because he didn't know if 10 monsters would jump out at once. If so, he would have to stretch his neck out. The fog in front of him rolled and surged, and a figure stepped out of it. Lu Yi looked over and was stunned. He didn't expect that there were not only strange insect monsters in the Mirage Realm, but also people. It wasn't accurate to say that it was a person because the person was wrapped in fog, making it impossible to see their appearance. It was even impossible to tell whether they were male or female. This was obviously not a real person, but a mystery of the Mirage Realm. While Lu Yi was still looking at the other party, the figure wrapped in fog raised his hand and pointed, and a stream of light rushed towards him. It was the power of an imperial artifact. This guy was a 7th order cultivator. After a short while, in the cultivation room, Lu Yi opened his eyes with a pale face. His head hurt as if it had been pricked by needles. Although he was exhausted, he looked very excited. After killing the insect monsters in the 9th order, a cultivator appeared. This was something he didn't expect, but he was happy to see. Killing those insect monsters could temper his combat skills, but it didn't have much meaning in the end. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, he was fighting against myriad Demon Ridge cultivators. Turning insects into cultivators was undoubtedly more in line with his needs. He didn't know if he would have to kill insects the next time he went in. If he did, it would be troublesome. It would be best if he didn't, he secretly prayed. Compared to killing insects, he was more willing to fight with the cultivator in the fog because the other party's strength was indeed what a 7th order cultivator should have. Moreover, the other party was one of the best 7th order cultivators. He could only wait until tomorrow to verify it. He threw 2 spirit pills into his mouth and took out the book he brought back from Madame Yun to study. After half a day, his exhaustion receded and his spirit chi was abundant. He began to construct Spirit Tattoo 30. He didn't know if it was because he was in a good mood or because it felt good to the touch, but it was completed in one go today. He scattered the Spirit Tattoo 30 and tried to construct it again, but it failed. However, with the experience of a successful attempt, the rest was simple. The 3rd attempt succeeded, the 4th failed, the 5th succeeded, the 6th succeeded. Lu Yi practiced again and again, finding the feeling of success and accumulating experience from failure. After several dozen tries, his success rate had reached about 70%. This success rate was already not low. It should have already met Madame Yun's requirements. In other words, he could go to Madame Yun for the next step of learning. When he was constructing the spirit runes, his spirit energy was depleted. However, with the spirit gathering spirit rune and the gluttonous meal, the total amount of spirit energy in his body didn't decrease. Instead, it continued to increase. At this moment, it was already full. He examined his spiritual cavities and urged his spiritual energy to attack the barriers of his spiritual cavities. After only half an hour, the barriers of his spiritual apertures were broken. At this time, there were already 108 spiritual apertures in his body. And this number corresponded to the 7th order spirit stream realm. Circulating his spirit chi, Yang Kai began to circulate his spirit acupoints, forming a small heavenly cycle. As the shockwave swept out, he had reached the 7th order spirit stream realm. He had discovered the follow-up use of the Mirage realm, constructed 30 spirit inscriptions, and even broken through to the 7th order spirit stream realm. Today could be considered a triple blessing. It had been a month since he returned from the chess sea, which showed how fast his enlightenment speed was. He didn't continue cultivating and walked out of the cultivation room. Taking advantage of the abundant spirit energy, he went to construct a few spirit-gathering spirit runes for the other cultivation rooms. After his continuous efforts over the past few days, basically all the cultivation rooms had at least one spirit-gathering spirit rune. A few cultivation rooms had 2 spirit-gathering spirit runes. For example, Huaxiai and the others' cultivation rooms had 3 spirit-gathering spirit runes. Supplemented by the spirit-gathering array in the cultivation room, the efficiency of the disciples' cultivation was very high. An hour later, Lu Yi appeared on Bright Heart Peak and sat opposite Madame Yun. After inspecting the results of Lu Ye's construction of 30 spirit inscriptions, Madame Yun took out a large number of thin crystal chips. Each crystal chip was a spirit rune named after a number. They didn't have any practical use, but they played an indelible role in the process of imparting knowledge to a spirit rune master. Lu Yi dismantled the basic elements of these spirit runes one by one in front of Madame Yun without missing a single one. Then, Madame Yun taught him some techniques to construct spirit runes and the method of embedding yin and yang. Lu Yi asked some questions in his heart and received careful answers. When the sky was about to turn dark, Madame Yun took out 2 crystal chips. These are spirit inscriptions 83 and 165. When you successfully construct these 2 spirit runes, come find me. She handed over dozens of books to Lu Yi. Lu Yi carefully put them away and bid farewell to Madame Yun. He left Bright Heart Peak under the escort of the maidservant. He returned to the main peak and found his senior sister Shui Yuan. You've reached the 7th order. Shui Yuan looked at Lu Yi in surprise. She was surprised by his cultivation speed. That's right. Now that you've reached the 7th order, you can cultivate the way of artifact manipulation. Lu Ye's purpose for coming to Shui Yuan was very simple. He had encountered too many 7th order cultivators in the Chess Sea and was jealous of their ability to kill enemies with artifact manipulation. Now that he had cultivated to the 7th order, he naturally rushed over to ask for guidance. But I'm actually not very good at the way of artifact manipulation. Shui Yuan's eyes lit up. You should ask your 4th senior brother. He has high attainments in this way, so he's the most suitable person to teach you. 4th senior brother. Then I'll ask. After asking for a good meal from his 2nd senior sister to replenish his strength and feeding Hupa a blood vein in its scale armor, Lu Yi returned to the station's cultivation room without stopping. While cultivating, he sent a message to his 4th senior brother. Li Baxian was also a little surprised that Lu Yi had reached the 7th order so quickly. When he heard that Lu Yi wanted to ask him about the way of artifact manipulation, he told him everything he knew. Although he couldn't teach him face to face, there wasn't much difference in communicating through messages. After carefully explaining the essentials of artifact manipulation to Lu Yi, Li Baxian finally said, "Little junior brother, you should cultivate first. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me." Many thanks, senior brother. Taking out the mountain coiling saber, Yang Kai placed it on his lap and poured his spirit qi into it. According to Li Baxian, Spirit Stream Realm cultivators mainly used their spirit qi to control their artifacts, so there was a high requirement for their spirit qi. The purer their spirit qi, the more powerful and faster their artifact manipulation would be. There was also the issue of artifact manipulation's distance. Generally speaking, a 7th order cultivator's artifact manipulation range was about 300 meters, but the purer one's spirit qi was, the further their artifact manipulation range would be. This was undoubtedly a great advantage when fighting with enemies. At the same time, artifact manipulation also had extremely high requirements for a cultivator's spirit qi control, which also affected the speed and distance of their artifact manipulation. Speed and distance were the 2 main elements of artifact manipulation, while the purity and control of one's spirit qi were the 2 main requirements for artifact manipulation. When cultivators of the same cultivation fought with artifact manipulation, the one with the advantage in speed and distance would undoubtedly be stronger. Of course, there was also the artifact manipulation itself. Lu Yi wasn't worried about the purity of his spirit qi. His talent tree burned away all pill toxins, so his spirit chi was always pure and flawless, not to mention his control over it. Even the extremely small yin and yang dual lands could be constructed and transformed at will, not to mention others. In this world, when it came to spirit chi control, no one could surpass a spirit tattooist. The biggest reason why cultivators could only cultivate the artifact manipulation after reaching the 7th order was that only cultivators at this level could control spirit chi outside of their body to a certain extent. It was unlike those below the 7th order, who couldn't control their spirit chi once it left their body. This reminded Lu Yi of a problem that had been troubling him for a long time, and that was the fire phoenix technique that he used. All this time, Lu Yi basically didn't use this technique to fight enemies unless it was under certain circumstances. This was because accuracy was a big problem. If he used up his spiritual energy to activate a technique and ended up missing, not only would it be a waste of spiritual energy, but it could also give the enemy an opportunity to attack. But when he was chased by Dong Shai used a huge fireball that could bend, and it chased after him and Hupa until they were in a sorry state. Now that he thought about it, this was the difference between a 7th order cultivator and a cultivator below the 7th order. Dong Shai could control spirit chi outside of his body, so his fireball technique could bend. And now, he had also reached the 7th order. In order to verify this, Lu Yi walked out of the cultivation room and activated the fire phoenix technique, shooting it towards the sky. In an instant, scorching hot spirit chi surged, and a fat bird flapped its wings and flew into the sky. If it was before, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to control this fat bird when it flew out, and whether it hit the enemy or not was up to fate. But now, he could clearly feel that the spirit chi that had gathered into the fire phoenix technique was still under his control. With a slight thought, the fat bird flying towards the sky immediately changed its direction and happily flapped its wings in the air. But as time passed, the spirit chi that had gathered into this technique was rapidly dissipating, and it seemed that it would disappear completely in a few breaths. Puchi! A laugh came from the side. Lu Yi turned his head and saw a young girl with her hand over her eyes, looking up at the sky, her gaze following the fat bird's flight path. This girl looked familiar. Seemingly aware of Lu Ye's gaze, the young girl quickly retracted her gaze and looked around. "What's your name?" The young girl stood up straight, swallowed hard, and said loudly, reporting to 5th senior brother, "My name is Hishin." Her eyes quickly turned, and she weakly glanced at Lu Yi, adding, "Also, I wasn't laughing at you just now." "Then what are you laughing at?" The young girl, Hishin, swallowed again. "I don't know what I'm laughing at, I just suddenly felt like laughing." "5th senior brother, I really wasn't laughing at you." As if she felt that her words weren't convincing at all, she directly squatted down and covered her head. "I was wrong, 5th senior brother, don't hit me." She was on tenterhooks for a while, but when she looked up, Lu Ye's figure was already gone, so she patted her chest and let out a long sigh of relief. Chapter 212. In the cultivation room, Lu Yi poured his spirit energy into the saber and controlled the mountain coiling saber. It wasn't very smooth at first, but he soon grasped some of the key points according to 4th senior brother's teachings. The mountain coiling saber, wrapped in fiery red spirit energy, floated up like a toddler. Before Lu Yi could rejoice, the spirit energy wrapped around the saber dissipated and it fell heavily to the ground. He hurriedly collected his thoughts and continued. This process was very slow and consumed a lot of spirit energy. If it weren't for the fact that he was in the cultivation room, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to persist for long. In the cultivation room, the consumption and increase of spirit energy were basically balanced, so Lu Yi could always maintain his spirit energy and even have spare energy to open the next spirit aperture. Now, his days were much more fulfilling than before. In the past, Lu Yi would study the books brought back from Madame Yun when he was not cultivating. He would absorb all kinds of knowledge about spiritual tattoos and then construct spiritual tattoos. Every day, he would find time to go to the Mirage realm to fight. Now, in addition to these two things, there was one more thing to practice, the art of controlling a weapon. Not only that, after his cultivation reached the 7th order, he could also cultivate the second spirit art recorded in the Red Lotus Soaring to the Heavens secret art. The first spirit art was the Fire Phoenix technique, which he cultivated when he was in the 4th order. The second was the Fire Dragon technique. Perhaps because he was used to constructing spirit inscriptions, it wasn't difficult for Lu Yi to learn spirit arts. This was also why he was often mistaken for a spirit art cultivator. His casting speed was no worse than a real spirit art cultivator, but there were some differences. A real spirit art cultivator couldn't only master 1 or 2 spirit arts. Lu Yi spent less than half a day to display the Fire Dragon technique, which was much simpler than artifact manipulation. A 7th order cultivator's secret art was undoubtedly much more powerful than the Fire Phoenix technique, but it also consumed a lot of energy. Lu Yi found a secluded place in the station to test the power of the Fire Dragon technique, but after that, he no longer paid any attention to it. For him, since he had chosen the path of an armament cultivator, he naturally had to walk it to the end. He only had a few spirit arts, so there was no need to study them too deeply. His focus now was basically on artifact manipulation. After reaching the 7th order, how could he fight if he didn't know artifact manipulation? As usual, the Mirage Realm could be entered once a day. Although it cost 50 merit points each time, the life and death experience accumulated inside could not be exchanged for no amount of merit points. What made Lu Yi sad and indignant was that after breaking through to the 7th order and entering the Mirage Realm, he had to deal with these strange insects again. However, the insects that jumped out of the mist this time were no longer comparable to a 6th order cultivator, but were instead comparable to him in strength to a 7th order cultivator. It seemed that the insect monsters he encountered in the Mirage Realm were indeed related to his cultivation. Combined with his previous experience, Lu Yi would most likely have to kill his way through 9 checkpoints in one go before a cultivator would appear from the fog to fight him. Yang Kai had just broken through to the 7th order and was still in the process of cultivating his artifact controlling technique, so if he wanted to break through 9 hurdles in one go, it would be incredibly difficult, so he could only take his time. 5 days later, Lu Yizai really couldn't take it anymore. The main thing was that his progress in tool control had been very slow these days. He wasn't someone who couldn't take a blow, but after seeing Qin Yu's artifact controlling technique yesterday, he couldn't help but feel a little depressed. Now, the only 7th order cultivator in the station besides him was Qin Yu. Lu Yi naturally wanted to see how others used artifact controlling technique, so he sent a message to Qin Yu asking him to come over and demonstrate. As a result, Qin Yu's artifact controlling technique flew off, turning into a stream of light that shuttled back and forth 300 meters, as light as a bird. Qin Yu even thought that his artifact controlling technique was not elegant enough and that he had made a fool of himself in front of Lu Yi. If Qin Yu's artifact controlling technique was a display of incompetence, then Lu Yi felt like he was being disgraced. He had asked Qin Yu about it, and after breaking through to the 7th order, it had only taken him 3 days to barely master the artifact controlling technique, while Lu Yi himself, after returning to the station, Lu Yi went to his second senior sister's place to ask for a meal. With a depressed mood, how could he resolve his worries? The only thing he could do was eat. Seemingly noticing something, Shui Yuan picked up some food for Lu Yizai and asked, "Did something happen in the station that made you worried?" And Lu Yi responded vaguely. "Then what's wrong?" Shui Yuan was puzzled and asked softly. Lu Yi swallowed the food in his mouth and sighed, "I found that I have no talent in the artifact controlling technique. What others can do in 3 days, I'm afraid I won't be able to do in a month." Shui Yuan said, "Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Everyone has something they are good at. Little junior brother, you have such a high talent in the way of spiritual tattoos that even Madame Yun praises you. You can even kill enemies who are at a higher level. However, it is impossible for a person to be good at everything. Don't worry too much." Although there were many more disciples in the sect now, Shui Yuan still called Lu Yi little junior brother. For her, the words little junior brother had a very special meaning. It was because of this little junior brother that Blue Blood sect could continue to exist. I understand, but I'm still a little unwilling. Then, after we finish eating, should I give you some pointers? Although my talent in the artifact controlling technique is not as high as your fourth senior brother's, it's still not bad. She was a dignified true Lake Realm cultivator, so how could her artifact controlling technique be bad? The reason why she asked Lu Yi to ask Li Baxian was not because she wanted to be lazy, but because Li Baxian's talent in the artifact controlling technique was really high. When an ordinary cultivator reached the 7th order realm, they would generally use one spirit artifact. As their cultivation increased and their control over their spirit chi improved, the number of spirit artifacts they could use would slowly increase. But after Li Baxian reached the 7th order realm, he directly used 9 spirit artifacts. His control over his spirit chi had reached an incredible level. This was one of the reasons why the North Profound Sword Sect's sword master valued him so much. Li Baxian's artifact controlling technique, coupled with his identity as a sword cultivator, was the reason why he could occupy the 10th place on the spirit stream list with his 8th order heaven grade cultivation. Last time, when Yan Xing fought with him, he was directly beaten by over 100 sword lights. After the meal, Shui Yuan accompanied Lu Yi to the square and stood 300 meters away from him. She smiled and said, "Little junior brother, feel free to attack with your artifact controlling technique." Lu Yi looked around and saw no one, so he took out his spirit artifact from his storage bag. Seeing him take out the mountain coiling saber, Shui Yuan frowned slightly and her expression became slightly dignified. Lu Yi began to pour his spirit chi into the saber and said, "Please advise me, senior sister." He wasn't worried about hurting Shui Yuan. Not to mention the huge gap in strength between them, just the distance of 300 meters. Lu Yi couldn't cross it. His spirit chi climbed onto the saber, and with a thought from Lu Yi, the saber was unsheathed and turned into a fiery red stream of light that rushed towards Shui Yuan. Shui Yuan's eyes revealed a look of surprise. The speed of the stream of light wasn't too slow, but it was definitely not fast either. It was much slower than the artifact controlling technique of the people Lu Yi had seen in the chess sea. If all 7th order cultivators were at this level of artifact controlling, they wouldn't be a threat to him at all. Even if dozens of artifact controlling techniques attacked at the same time, he would still be able to easily dodge them. The stream of light stopped 10 meters away from Shui Yuan. In other words, Lu Ye's artifact controlling technique could only cover an area of 20 meters. He controlled the saber to fly a few times in the air before returning to its scabbard before the spirit chi he poured into it was exhausted. That's the general idea, Lu Yi scratched his head. This was the result of his 5 days of artifact controlling technique. It was short, and the distance was much worse than others. If he used artifact controlling technique to fight with others, he would definitely suffer a great loss. It was flat, and its speed was slow, and its lethality wasn't strong. It was fast, and he could only maintain it for a few breaths of time before he had to take it back. Otherwise, when the spirit chi he poured into the saber was exhausted, he wouldn't be able to control it anymore and it might be seized by the enemy. Shui Yuan walked towards him and stretched out her hand, "Let me see your saber." Lu Yi pulled out the mountain saber and handed it over. Shui Yuan pushed her spirit chi, and a soft light enveloped the saber as she inspected it. After a short while, she said with a strange expression, "Little junior brother, have you been using this saber to practice artifact controlling technique?" "Yes." Shui Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The seal on this saber isn't suitable for artifact controlling, so how could you use it to practice artifact controlling? Moreover, this saber is too heavy. Didn't your fourth senior brother tell you to choose a good spirit artifact before you practice artifact controlling? Lu Yi thought for a moment, no. Li Baxian taught him many tricks and essentials of artifact controlling, but he didn't mention anything about spirit artifacts. Shui Yuan slapped her forehead, "This guy is too irresponsible." "Is it the saber's problem?" Lu Yi was a little nervous and a little expectant, like a terminally ill person who suddenly heard someone say that he could still be saved. It's the saber's problem. This saber doesn't have a seal suitable for artifact controlling, and it's not light. That's why your artifact controlling is very short and slow. Moreover, little junior brother, you should have seen other artifact controlling in the chess sea. Didn't you notice that your artifact controlling is different from others? I did notice it, but I thought it was my own problem. Shui Yuan sighed, you're also amazing. You actually managed to artifact controlling with such a saber. Then what kind of spirit artifact is suitable for artifact controlling? It has to be light. Of course, it doesn't mean that lighter is better. If it's too light, it won't have enough destructive power. It depends on your own choice. Secondly, it depends on the seal on the spirit artifact. At the very least, there has to be a spirit storage seal. Otherwise, you'll end up like you just now. The spirit artifact controlling will be recalled after a few breaths of time. How can you use it? A spirit storage seal can allow you to store spirit chi in the spirit artifact. This way, you'll be able to artifact controlling for longer. Lu Yi let out a long breath, so that's how it is. Shui Yuan looked at him apologetically, in the end, it's our senior brother and senior sister's negligence. The main reason was that the Blue Blood sect hadn't accepted anyone for so many years, so Shui Yuan didn't know how to guide others in their cultivation. As for Li Baxian, he was only focused on teaching Lu Yi about artifact controlling, so he didn't think about spirit artifacts at all. Perhaps he thought that Lu Yi had a spirit artifact that was suitable for artifact controlling. She then explained to Lu Yi about the seals suitable for artifact controlling. Lu Yi remembered this in his heart and excitedly rushed towards the Destiny Hall. I'll go find a suitable spirit artifact. He was excited. My artifact controlling technique, there's still hope. Chapter 213. It wasn't Lu Ye's first time buying something from the Tianji treasury, so he naturally knew how to find what he needed quickly. A moment later, he stood in the Tianji treasury, surrounded by shelves filled with spirit artifacts. He searched through them one by one. There were many types of spirit artifacts here that could satisfy any cultivator's needs. According to his second senior sister, there was a difference between a spirit artifact for imperial artifact and a spirit artifact for direct combat. The former required at least 3 kinds of restrictions: spirit storage, foundation reinforcement, and sharpness. The spirit storage restriction was to ensure the endurance of the imperial artifact. A cultivator's spirit chi was stored in this restriction, and it would gradually be consumed when imperial artifact was used. Without this restriction, Lu Yi would have to withdraw his spirit artifact after a few breaths of imperial artifact. As for foundation reinforcement and sharpness, they were required for every spirit artifact. The former could strengthen the spirit artifact and make it harder to break, while the latter increased its damage. After walking around, Lu Yi found it hard to make a choice. The spirit artifacts here were generally more expensive than normal spirit artifacts. For example, his mountain coiling saber had 9 layers of restrictions, which was the limit of a low-grade spirit artifact. It only cost 135 merit points. But if a spirit artifact was suitable for imperial equipment and had 9 layers of restrictions, the price would approach 200 merit points. It seemed that the mountain coiling saber he bought back then was still considered cheap. Just as he was about to buy one, he suddenly remembered that he didn't need to come to the Tianji Hall to buy it. Hua Xiai should have many spirit artifacts. She didn't kill many people in the chess sea, but with her help, Grand Heaven Alliance's cultivators killed countless enemies. Hua Xiai was grateful for her contribution, so every time she cleaned up the battlefield, she would get some spoils of war. When she returned, her mechanical wolf was full of storage bags. This was the result of some of the storage bags being gathered together. If they weren't, there would be even more storage bags. After leaving the Tianji treasury, Lu Yi sent a message to Hua Xiai. Soon, she came over from the cultivation room. You've reached the 7th order. Hua Xiai looked at Lu Yi in surprise. After returning from the chess sea, Everyone had been cultivating hard and rarely met. If it wasn't for Lu Ye's message, she wouldn't have known that Lu Ye had reached the 7th order. N. Do you have any spirit artifacts suitable for Imperial Artifact? Yes, I have them, but they're not on me. Hua Xiai turned to leave and called out, "Follow me." He went straight to the training room. Not long after, the two of them entered Hua Xi's personal training room side by side. Lu Yi focused his gaze and saw a large pile of storage pouches in a corner of the room. They were all brought back from the Go-Si. You haven't dealt with it yet. Hua Xiai said, I saved it for you. What for? Second senior sister apprentice said that you have made great progress in the way of spiritual tattoos. Maybe it won't be long before you need these storage bags. Lu Yi was puzzled. What did his rapid progress in the way of spiritual tattoos have to do with these storage bags? Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before coming to a realization. Thank you for your concern. Hua Xiai took out 3 items from the storage pouches and handed them to Lu Yi. The spirit tools are all inside. You can look for them yourself. I don't know what you want. Lu Yi took it, sat down cross-legged, and began searching. Hua Xiai ignored him and began to cultivate at the side. There were all kinds of spirit artifacts obtained from the Go-Si. The main reason was that Hua Xiai could not take any more storage pouches in the end. The cultivators of the Haotian Alliance gathered all the spirit artifacts left behind by the cultivators of the Myriad Demon's Ridge and put them into a storage pouch before giving them to Hua Xiai. Some of them were suitable for Imperial Artifact. There were hundreds of spirit artifacts of all kinds in the 3 storage pouches. If Hua Xiai sold all these spirit artifacts to the Tianji treasure house, she would definitely get a huge number of merit points. However, she did not lack merit points now, so she kept these spirit artifacts. Perhaps she could use them as rewards for her disciples in the future. She was now the deputy guardian of the Jade Blood sect. She had already gotten used to and accepted her new identity. Second senior sister apprentice also treated her very well. She was also a medical cultivator. With second senior sister apprentice's guidance, she could avoid many detours. Naturally, she was willing to make some contributions to the Jade Blood sect. After searching for a long time, Lu Yi chose a foot-long saber from the many spirit artifacts. The short saber's weight and length were very suitable. At first glance, it was obvious that it was specially used for Imperial Artifact. This short saber did not have a handle, only 2 sharp ends. She did not know which Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivator had left this spirit artifact behind. There were a total of 9 restrictions. Such a spirit artifact would cost at least 180 merit points or more in the Tianji treasure house. Among the 9 restrictions, 2 of them were for spirit storage, 3 were for strengthening the saber, and 2 were for increasing the damage of the spirit artifact. Lu Yi did not know what the last 2 restrictions were, but they were definitely for increasing the power of the Imperial Artifact. Choose a few more. I heard that if you have enough control over your spirit chi, you can control several spirit artifacts at the same time, Hua Xiai reminded Lu Yi when she saw that Lu Yi had chosen. I'll practice first. I'll come to you when I need it. Okay, I can't run away anyway. Why do you sound like someone has tied you up? Who knows? Walking out of Hua Xi's cultivation room, Lu Yi entered his own cultivation room and poured his spirit chi into the short saber. This short saber was different from the Pan Mountain saber. Lu Yi had bought the Pan Mountain saber from the Tianji treasure house. It was an ownerless item and could be used as soon as he obtained it. However, this short saber originally belonged to a Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivator. Even though that cultivator had died, he had left many traces of himself on this short saber. Simply put, this short saber had already adapted to its previous owner's spirit chi. If someone else rashly activated it, they might not be able to display its full power. What Lu Yi needed to do now was to use his spirit chi to nourish it and let it adapt to his spirit chi. Only then could he display the full power of this short saber. This was the case when Lu Yi obtained the 9 stars Sect's young master's spirit artifact Small Bell. At first, he had no way to activate the Small Bell's power. Later, with the guidance of a Tianji Business Alliance locksmith, he slowly figured it out. Therefore, in a battle, it was useless to casually pick up someone else's spirit artifact. Only one's own was the best. With Lu Ye's current 7th order cultivation and the purity of his spirit energy, it didn't take him long to nurture a spirit artifact. After only half a day, the hiltless dagger had transformed into a stream of light under Lu Ye's control and was flying around the cultivation room nimbly. Lu Yi was in tears. After stumbling around for a while, he finally found the correct way to operate his spirit artifact. The cultivation room was too small to operate, so Lu Yi walked out. Soon, a whistling sound came from outside the cultivation room. Lu Yi found that he could operate his spirit artifact for a range of about 350 meters, which surprised him. Generally speaking, a 7th order cultivator's spirit artifact would not exceed 300 meters. This 5-meter range was not to be underestimated. If Lu Yi fought with an enemy's spirit artifact, his attack range was 5 meters higher than that of a cultivator of the same level, allowing him to take the initiative and control the rhythm of the battle. Moreover, the speed of his spirit artifact seemed to be much faster than that of an average 7th order cultivator. In the chess sea, he had seen too many 7th order cultivators use their spirit artifact to kill enemies. Comparing the two, he quickly discovered his own advantage. His spirit artifact could operate farther than others, faster than others, and even stronger than others. As a result, Lu Yi didn't even need to make a move to kill a cultivator of the same level. Many disciples were attracted by the movement here and ran over to watch. Watching the stream of light fly by, they all cheered in envy. Suddenly, a rumbling sound came from the horizon, and the sky was covered with dark clouds and lightning. Lu Yi put away the stream of light and waved his hand. "It's raining, let's disperse." Turning around, he walked into the cultivation room. Right now, he had reached the minor accomplishment stage in spirit artifact manipulation, but this method of killing enemies still needed to be tested in actual combat. Don't look at how fancy spirit artifact manipulation was when he was cultivating. If it couldn't be used in actual combat, it would be meaningless. Lu Yi prepared to enter the Mirage Realm. Taking out the core of the breath fruit, he entered the small room, spent 50 merit points, opened the door, and walked into the fog. As soon as he stood still, the fog began to roll, and a large insect comparable to Lu Ye's cultivation rushed out of the fog. However, just as it appeared, a stream of light suddenly swept over and passed through the insect's body without any hindrance, leaving behind a spray of green blood. The aggressive insect fell to the ground as soon as it appeared. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. The spirit artifact manipulation was indeed useful. It was much easier than using the mountain coiling saber. The fog to his left and right rolled again, and 2 more insects rushed out. Just like before, one of them was killed as soon as it rushed out, and the other only managed to run 2 steps. The stream of light flashed, and the insects were killed one after another. By the 4th level, it was too late to rely on spirit artifact manipulation alone. No matter how fast spirit artifact manipulation was, there was a limit. These insects weren't slow, so Lu Yi used the mountain coiling saber to kill the insects that rushed in front of him. By the time he reached the 5th level, the short saber's spirit energy was exhausted. Lu Yi took it back before it ran out and fought with the mountain coiling saber. A moment later, in the cultivation room, Lu Yi opened his eyes with a pale face. Just now, he had only reached the 8th level before he was killed by the insects. There was a big difference between a 7th order insect and a 6th order insect. The increase in strength was very obvious, and it was the same for cultivators. Without mentioning anything else, the addition of spirit artifact manipulation would greatly increase a cultivator's overall strength. Although he hadn't even reached the 9th stage, Lu Yi wasn't dissatisfied. He had only broken through to the 7th order a few days ago and had only just begun cultivating his imperial artifact technique. One had to know that before this, he had only reached the 5th stage, but now that he had an Imperial artifact, he was able to reach the 8th stage, an obvious improvement. If he had 2 or even 3 spirit artifacts, Lu Yi felt that he might be able to break through the 9th level. At that time, he would be able to fight the cultivators in the fog. He still had to go to Hua Ci and get a few more suitable spirit artifacts. When he was using spirit artifact manipulation just now, he felt like he could handle it with ease, so he should be able to use one more spirit artifact. This was the benefit of having enough control over one's spirit energy. Thunder rumbled outside, as if it was going to rain. Suddenly, the battlefield imprint moved. Lu Yi checked it and found that it was a message from his 4th senior brother. It was only a simple sentence, "Little junior brother, be careful. The insect tide is coming." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.